A bankrupt rich man came to visit his mother, who was abandoned in the middle of nowhere 5 years ago. And as he approached, that night, Walter's dreams were so vivid that when he woke up, he thought, "That's it. I'm drunk. I'm hallucinating." His head rattled so much that he had no strength to get out of bed. The man rolled over onto his side with difficulty and slowly got up. There were pills somewhere. He pulled out the nightstand drawer, fumbled inside with his hand to dissolve the pill in a glass of water. Walter drank and lay down again. He dreamt of his father that night. He was angry with his son, swearing and shouting. But what he did to his mother. "You're selfish and mean," his father said. And Walter stood in front of him as he had years before, as a child, and did not look up. "Mother spent her whole life raising you, denied herself an extra dress. And the dream was so explicit that Walter could almost physically feel the slap his father had given him. It was at this moment that his mother had to stand up for her son. She had always protected him from everyone, calmed his father when he was angry, defended him in front of his teachers at school, scolded the neighborhood kids, taking away his bicycle. Where is the mother? His father was getting more and more unruly. He was about to take off his belt and give Walter a beating. But Mum wasn't in the dream. She never came to save her son. And that realization made me feel cold inside. Fear gripped his whole body and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Walter woke up covered in sweat. The man hadn't seen his mother in 5 years. Maybe she's dead, he thought, and that thought made his head crack even harder. Walter slowly looked around the room. Slowly he began to remember everything that had happened the day before. The bailiffs had shown up at the office yesterday with a notice that Walter no longer owned the firm, his accounts were seized, and he had to leave the flat within 10 days. "What the fuck are you guys doing?" Walter raged. "It's get the hell out of here or I'll call security." The man reached for the phone to dial the number of the head of security, but the uniformed man held out an ordinance to him. "What's this? What are you pulling at me?" "Your paperwork's failing." Walter was confused as he read what was printed on the white sheet of paper. The paper stated that the new owner of the firm was Monica Kravchenko. "Wait," the man said in a more peaceful tone. "Can I call the owner of this Monica who is in the paper here? I'll try to find out everything. I know her." "Please," the man in uniform said indifferently. "Just do your best. We won't be here long." Walter frantically dialed Monica's number, not understanding what had happened or why she owned his firm. This is some kind of misunderstanding, he thought. For a moment, the man thought he was being pranked, like on a famous TV show. Now the door will open and a film crew will come in. Everyone will shout it's a prank. A polite voice is heard in the receiver. "The subscriber is temporarily unavailable." "Shit," Walter cursed. "You can only take your personal belongings. Everything else must stay in the office." And seeing that his attempts to reach the new owner had failed, the bailiff pointed to the door. "Please." Still uncomprehending, the man headed for the door. On his way out, he mumbled, "I'll call the lawyers, I'll sort it all out. This is a misunderstanding." "It's your right." The uniformed man replied calmly, locking the door behind Walter. "Have a good day." Leaving the office, Walter dialed George's number. George was a childhood friend. "George." "We need to meet," the man said when his mate's voice came through the phone. "I'm in trouble." "No problem," Brother George replied. "Where and when?" "Let's meet at our bar on the seafront. Get there as soon as you can. All right?" "I will." When George walked through the door, Walter had almost emptied the bottle of whiskey. "Will you have a drink?" he asked his friend, and without waiting for an answer, poured the rest into the glass. "Goov, one more, and get something to eat." "You've got a lot on your plate." Bro George looked at his friend critically. "What's the occasion?" "You won't believe this. I got kicked out of my own office today. And they said my accounts are blocked, and I have to get out of my flat within 10 days. "So you see, they kicked you out of your own firm and won't let you back into your flat," George replied calmly. He sipped from his glass and took a bite of lemon slices. "Everything seemed fine with you, no problems." "I don't understand it either," Walter said in a stammering voice. "But the main thing, mate, you don't know the most important thing. They showed me a paper that says I'm no longer the owner of the company, but the new owner. Who do you think?" George looked with interest at his friend, who was already pouring from the bottle brought by the waiter. The man drank the whiskey, emptied the glass completely, trying to concentrate his gaze, looked into his mate's eyes. "The new owner of the firm is Monica Kravchenko." He said these words sarcastically, slowly, deliberately stretching each syllable so that George would understand faster. "You're Monica?" George seemed surprised. "How so? Did you sign the firm over to her? Are you stupid or what? It's enough that you provide for her with her boutique spas, foreign resorts. I wouldn't have thought of that. Then how did she come to own your firm and your flat?" George had a drink, too. I know. Walter slammed his fist on the table, drawing the attention of the other bar patrons. The guard at the door tensed up, stretching, ready to throw the rowdy customer out the door. "Let's ask her." He took out his smartphone and dialed Monica's number, which was marked as favored in his contacts. But the caller was still unavailable. "No answer, bitch," the man swore. "How about the spa?" George suggested. "That's where the girls usually switch their phones off." Damn it, Walter poured the glasses again. In the morning, he could hardly remember everything that happened afterwards, seeing that he'd had too much to drink. To avoid unnecessary trouble, the guard asked the friends to leave. Walter was indignant, trying to fight with the security guard. George persisted in dragging him into the air. He was assisted in this by the guard. George shoved Walter into the taxi and got in the front seat himself. Walter didn't remember anything else. Walter woke up in his bed with the realization that it was no longer his own. He slapped his bare feet on the floor. The man stalked into the kitchen, hoping there was something to drink in the fridge. "George, that's the kind of friend you are. You could have supplied me with something for my hangover," Walter thought, unable to find anything that would help his health. Sighing heavily, he headed for the shower to get some relief and get back to normal. The jets of water were refreshing. For a moment, Walter's memory told him that the bailiff's paperwork had not mentioned his car. "I'm going to go see Monica. Let her tell me how she so cleverly took over my firm," the man thought, drying himself with a fluffy towel. He hastily drank a cup of coffee, pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, and left the flat. There was no car in the yard. Walter remembered that he had left it outside the office. When he took a taxi to the office center, he was happy to see that his Jeep was parked in the car park. From the car, the man decided to call the office. "Yes, Walter," the friendly voice of Mandy's secretary answered the phone. "Is anyone in my office?" "No, I'm in the waiting room. No one's come in," she answered. "And when will you be here?" Without answering the girl's question, he asked another. "Has Monica been in?" "No," I said. "No one's here." "All right, work. Anyway, listen. Close everything up and go home. Get some rest. I'll call you later when there's news." The man turned the key in the ignition and drove out of the car park. He was determined. "Now this bitch will explain everything. She'll tell me everything. I trusted her like I trusted myself. How did she manage to pull this on me?" The Jeep flew down the avenue, overtaking cars, trolleybuses, buses. Walter imagined Monica telling him, "Honey, it was just a joke and everything would fall back into place." Entering the entrance of the house where his mistress lived, Walter pressed the button for the lift. But the lift was still not coming. He stood for a while and decided to climb the stairs to the 8th floor. The bell to the girl's flat rang with a cheerful trill. No one answered. Walter pressed the button again. Finally, the door opened. Monica stood on the threshold. "You, what are you doing here?" she asked. But Walter pushed her away and walked inside. "You tell me what you're doing." "Yesterday I found out that you've taken over my company and my flat and embezzled my bank accounts." The man went into the living room. Monica followed him leisurely, wrapping up her dressing gown. "Why aren't you saying anything? Why are you flapping your eyes at me?" The girl looked at Walter confusedly, with fear in her eyes. Suddenly the door to the bedroom opened and George came out. Now, confusion appeared in Walter's eyes. "It's you. What are you doing here?" he asked his friend. "I was asleep, as you see," he replied. "Why here?" Walter still didn't understand. George went to the bar, took out a bottle of wine and 3 glasses. He opened it slowly and, pouring the red liquid, handed 1 glass to Monica and sipped from the other. "Shall we drink?" He nodded at the glass. "I'm driving," Walter replied. The absurdity of the situation kept him from realizing what was happening. But he was beginning to realize the worst of it. His best friend was sleeping with his girlfriend, and his girlfriend had somehow robbed him of everything he had earned over the past years. "Will you explain something to me?" Walter plopped down on the couch, folded his arms across his chest, and prepared to listen to his lover and his friend's explanations. "I'm asking both of you," he raised his voice, glancing at George and the girl. "Don't you yell," George told him calmly. "Not at home. In fact, you don't even have a home anymore. Monica owns the flat as well as the firm. So it's not in your best interest to make a fuss here. If you behave well, we'll leave you some money for the first time," said George. "You will? You'll leave me some?" Walter jumped up from the couch, grabbed George by the neck, and started to shake him. But the man pushed him with such force that he was instantly back where he had been. Walter wrapped his arms around his head. Everything that was happening seemed like a terrible dream, a nightmare, a delusion. "So you're the one who pulled this off and left me with nothing." It finally dawned on Walter that this was no joke, no prank. "What do you think?" George asked wryly. "Monica wouldn't do such a thing. She's not very clever, as you know, but she has many other talents." "Yes, Monica." George put his arm round the girl's waist and held her close to him. He looked victorious next to Walter, who was devastated after last night's binge, humiliated. "How could you, George? We've been friends since we were kids," Walter asked in a quiet voice. "Friends?" George let go of Monica and walked over to Walter, who was sitting on the couch. He leaned over him, his gaze angry and prickly. "Is that what friends do? You always acted like a king, always taking the best for yourself. I had to make do with what was left. You had the best girls, the best clothes. Your parents even gave you a car freshman year. I was always your shadow, always rushing to your aid when you were whining, George, help. Like yesterday, I came to you as soon as you called. Only that was the last time." "Saying something like that?" Walter tried to get a word in edgewise. "Shut up and listen." George cut him off. "I'll be running the firm from now on. Monica is just a formality. Without her, I couldn't have gotten the business away from you. I mean, you were head over heels in love with her. Fool. But you've always been emotionally driven and you've never thought straight. You're also too young and overconfident. No, Walter, you have no sense of self-preservation. And in this day and age, you can't trust anyone. You hear me? Not even the woman who spends the night with you. And you're the one who likes to talk about your successes," George continued. "So how much do you need for the first time? I'm not greedy. I can slip a few $1,000s from your old accounts." "Fuck you," Walter got up from the couch, looked angrily at his former, now no longer friend. Then he looked at Monica. "You're still a doormat, just like you were a doormat. You think he needs you? He'd trade you for another girl with longer legs." "All right, that's enough." George interrupted Walter. "Get out of here. Get out of here. And I don't want to see you again." George pushed Walter towards the exit. Back in the flat, he took out his suitcase and began to pack. A black anger was ripening in the man's soul, developing a filth-stinking, nasty, unbearable filth. Rolling the suitcase into the hallway, Walter returned to the bedroom and opened the safe. It was a good thing he'd been smart enough to keep at least some cash. He put a few wads of money into the suitcase, opened the door and left the flat. The man had nowhere to go. He had been driving around the city for several hours, wondering if he could stay at a holiday resort on the bay. It was a good idea in itself, but Walter didn't want to be alone. He needed to talk, alone in nature. Only a bottle would do. Without noticing, Walter drove out of town. He remembered his nightmare. Why hadn't he dreamt about his mother? She always stood up for Walter when his father scolded him. The decision came naturally. He would go to the remote village where he had taken his mother 5 years ago. It was time to apologize for everything, to repent for getting rid of an aging woman, to live a life of pleasure, to fall to his knees and beg, plead, forgive him. just so long as Mum was alive. Walter's mother, Tiffany, was originally from Vermont. Her parents lived in a lakeside village near a nature preserve. They worked on a ranch. Unlike other families that had 5 or 6 children, Tiffany's parents did not have many children. After giving birth to a daughter, Tiffany's mother underwent a complicated surgery and was unable to have any more children. The father, who had always wanted multiple sons, accepted it, but Tiffany grew up surprisingly docile. She helped her father and mother with everything. She carried water, stacked firewood, weeded the vegetable garden. Gradually, her father even began to take her hunting and fishing. Her mother tried to teach her the wisdom of cooking. On long winter evenings, they spun, knitted and sewed warm clothes together: socks, mittens, hats, waistcoats. When Tiffany finished 9 grades, she was ready to leave for New York. The village slowly began to die out. The young people were moving away. Houses were falling into disrepair, left without owners. Having settled in the cities, the children took the elderly parents to their homes. When Tiffany's mother heard of her daughter's plans, she pleaded, "Daughter, how can we be without you? Who will bring us a glass of water in our old age? I'll go to college or university, finish, get a job and help you," Tiffany replied. "And my mother is right," said my father. "There's really nothing for girls to do here. I heard the other day they're closing the post office. We'll be traveling 40 miles for our pensions. Let her go, God willing, she'll do well and everything will be all right." Having reconciled, the mother helped her to pack her daughter's things, and on the appointed day, she and her father took her in a pickup truck to the railway station. A month later, they received a telegram. "Mom, Dad, I got into college." Tears came to the mother's eyes. Her father comforted her. "Tiffany's not stupid. She'll learn. She'll become a man. Maybe she'll take us with her." "Where can we go, Father?" "To New York," sobbed her mother. "Where would we go from our farm?" Tiffany was used to city life. After graduating from college, Tiffany got a job at a factory in the personnel department. That's where she met her husband. He was a foreman on the shop floor. For more than a year, the man courted the girl. He was 10 years older. So Tiffany was very shy of this grown man. But he was persistent, and after a year and a half, Tiffany and Stephen got married, planning a modest wedding. And after 3 more years, the works department gave the young family a flat. That's when they began to think about having children. But the years flew by, and Tiffany didn't get pregnant. Doctors said that she was completely healthy and did not understand the reason for the couple's childlessness. 10 years had passed since Tiffany had left her home village, moved away from her parents, and she was constantly writing letters to them. Dad and Mom answered them, but she couldn't go and visit her family. New York, with its frantic pace of life, wouldn't let her go. And yet Tiffany returned to the village. Only the occasion was not a happy one. One day she received a telegram from her father that her mother had died. Taking time off work, she and her husband bought train tickets and traveled to the funeral the same day. As they walked through the village streets to their home, Tiffany was struck by how different everything was. The windows of the ramshackle houses were boarded up. There were no flowering plants in the front gardens, and the cows and chickens could not be heard mooing in the yards. The village was dying. A few neighbors, mostly old men and women, stood at the gate of her father's house, black shawls tied around their heads. Tiffany walked into the house. On a stool stood the coffin in which her mother lay. The young woman cried as she crouched down beside it. She stroked her mother's head, her hands, gazing into her dead, peaceful expression. It was as if Mum was sound asleep. Only from that sleep there would never again be an awakening. After the wake, when the neighbors had dispersed, Tiffany and Stephen remained seated at the table with their father. "That's it, daughter. Our Mum's gone," the man said softly. "She was ill. That's understandable. It's just a pity she didn't get to see her grandchildren." "Daddy, we can't have boys," Tiffany complained. She noticed her husband's reproachful look and lowered her eyes. "Do the doctors say they're just throwing up their hands?" Dad asked. "They say we're both healthy," she shrugged her shoulders. "Apparently our time has not yet come to become parents." "It's not the time," sighed the father. "Sins do not give." "What are our sins, Daddy?" Tiffany got excited. "Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Sin is a multi-generational thing. You don't hear its reverberations right away, but you should repent for the sins of your ancestors. Well, it's time to go to bed. I'll go close up the cattle, and you make yourselves comfortable. We'll talk in the morning. And in the morning, the father woke up the sleeping couple and took his daughter and son-in-law to the forest. They walked for a long time along a narrow path until they came to a waterfall, a turbulent stream of water jets falling down from a high rock, creating an iridescent fountain of splashes in the sunlight. The spray played with different colors, flying in a fine trot in all directions. In the bowl at the foot of the waterfall, the water calmed down, allowing me to see the reflection of my face, slightly distorted by the movement of the water. "Take off your clothes," Father ordered. "Dip yourself in the water 3 times and cross yourself." "Am I not baptized?" Stephen tried to object, to whom the whole ritual seemed like nonsense. "Just say, 'Forgive me, Lord,'" the man said firmly, stroking his gray beard. "He might hear you. We're not Christians." Tiffany and Stephen went down to the waterfall bowl and did as their father had instructed. They walked home in silence, each thinking about something different. At dinner, Father said, "The old people used to say, if someone dies in a family and a child appears in the same year, it means that God has forgiven the sins of the deceased. God is merciful. He will forgive our mom and give you children." Stephen looked at his father-in-law in surprise. Tiffany only spoke, "God willing, Daddy, God willing." A month later, the woman found out she was pregnant. And in May, she and her husband had a beautiful baby boy, Walter. The couple was happy they couldn't get enough of the baby. The joy of the birth of a son overshadowed the death of Tiffany's father. The news that came from the neighbors, already after the funeral of the man, for 10 years of childless life they managed to save money. Therefore, immediately after the birth of their son, Tiffany and Stephen bought a cooperative 2-room flat in a new building, in which a separate room was allocated for Walter. Stephen quickly sobered up from the euphoria of becoming a father. He tried to teach his son to work hard, be responsible, and stand up for himself. But Tiffany continued to nurse him like a hen. "You're too hard on your son," Stephen, she told her husband, who made her 3-year-old son take out the bin. "He is still very young. It's nothing, he can lift a cup, but will he carry the bucket away?" On weekends, his father dragged his son to the park for a jog, made him do push-ups and pull-ups on the bar. And when he was 5 years old, he gave him to a boxing class. However, after the first bruise received by his son at the training, his mother flatly refused to take the child to boxing. "Do you want to make your only son an invalid?" She objected to her husband's arguments that the boy should grow up to be a man. Stephen was madly in love with his wife. It was difficult for him to argue with her. The man tried to avoid the slightest cause for quarrel, so in most cases Tiffany was able to win the right to bring up her son as she wanted. Walter was never denied anything. The best toys, a bicycle, beautiful things bought in brand-name shops, all this was taken for granted. Walter was not a stupid boy, though. At school, he studied for a solid 4. Teachers praised the bright pupil, but his discipline was lousy. With his friend George, who lived in the next door, they were always inventing new pranks. One day they bought a rat from a pet shop and put it in the teacher's desk drawer. When she opened it to take out her notebook, she nearly fainted. The mother was summoned to the principal's office. Blushing, she apologized for her son and promised that she would have a very serious talk with him at home. The next day, Walter and George broke a window in the teacher's lounge by throwing a basketball at it. Tiffany had to tell her husband. The principal strictly ordered that new glass be put into the window frame immediately, but the woman herself could not do it. As punishment, Walter was banned from the yard for a week. During spring break, he sat at home, looking out the window as the boys played in the yard. Still, Tiffany's son's childhood was no worse than other children's. In the 9th grade, Walter was given a moped for his birthday. At the end of the first year of the institute, his father bought him a new car. Parents loved their son with all their hearts, and no matter how hard they tried to bring him up in strictness, paid for his growing needs. After graduating from the economics department of the institute, the boy got a job in a large trading firm. "I'm not going to work for my uncle all my life," he told his parents. "Here I will gain experience, learn how everything is actually arranged there. I'll open my own firm." Father by that time had already retired, but continued to work, having traveled a long professional path from a simple worker to the master of the shop, and then the head of production. He thought that trade was not a serious business. The man repeatedly persuaded his son to go to work at the plant in the planning and economic department, but he only waved him away. "Here is your factory, the last century," said Walter. "The future is in business." Dad just shook his head. He thought that business was all about bandits, while an honest man should work for the good of his country. He himself lived like that until the last day, every morning passing through the factory gate. Walter's father passed away without giving anyone long suffering and agony. One day he fell asleep and never woke up. He died quietly, in his sleep. Walter turned 30 years old that year. After his father's funeral, Walter felt he was in charge of the family and felt it was his time to make decisions. He left the firm, sitting in his room in front of his computer 24 hours a day. Then one day he said to his mother, "I know you and your father had savings. I've decided to start my own firm and I want to ask you for money." "How much do you need?" Tiffany asked. "The more the better. I need to rent an office, buy office equipment, but I also need money for the first batch of goods," Walter replied. "I'll give it to you." "Sure, son," agreed his mother, who was not used to refusing Walter. A year later, Walter was already the director of a trading company, which did not bring super profits but worked quite successfully. The staff was a few dozen employees, which son Tiffany paid salaries on time, and especially enterprising even encouraged bonuses and trips to seaside resorts. And he was in no hurry to return the money his mother had given him to start the business. Tiffany didn't ask him to. She was happy that her son was doing what he loved and that he was good at it. As time went on, and one day Walter came home and told his mother, "I'm bringing a girl over tonight, so make us something for dinner." Tiffany smiled. She had been waiting for her son to marry for a long time, but there was no one in their house except his friend George, with whom they had been inseparable since childhood, and suddenly Walter would bring a girl. Maybe they'll even announce that they're getting married. Tiffany would be sure to bless the young couple so that all would be well in their lives. She really wanted to babysit her grandchildren. Her son is in his 30s, and he's not even thinking about kids. Walter met Monica at a club. A spectacular girl in a short, tight dress immediately attracted the attention of the guy. Bright, with a defiant look. She was the kind of girl they say pretty devil. She sat behind the bar and slowly sipped her cocktail. "Do you miss me?" Walter asked and sat down next to her. The girl looked at him with an appraising gaze. Apparently she liked the young man, decently dressed, attractive, and when he pulled his wallet out of his pocket, took out a large note and handed it to the bartender, saying, "I'll have a whiskey and the girl will have whatever she's drinking." The pretty girl smiled white-hot. Walter, the man, introduced himself. "Monica," the girl said, stretching her name slightly. "I mean here alone." "What are you interested in?" The girl was obviously flirting with her new acquaintance. "Very serious," Walter said, and put his palm on Monica's waist. "Be careful," she warned him. "I might hurt you." How could such a sweet, charming girl offend a poor, lonely guy? I wouldn't believe it. Walter tried to make a joke. "Here's to introductions," he drank, pushed the glass away from him, and said to the bartender mate, "Do it again." Monica, sipping her cocktail leisurely, looked at the man. "Are you alone?" the girl asked. "Not exactly. My friend and I agreed to meet here, to have a little fun, and all that work and work," answered Walter, calculating the next portion of whiskey. "So I'm the third extra?" Monica made a jokingly sad expression on her face. "Where does poor Walter work that he's so tired?" "Poor Walter works at his own firm." "Wait, what's poor Walter?" "He's not poor. He's a very rich man." He started to flounder a bit. "There's my friend George." George came to the counter. Walter introduced George to his new girlfriend, and the group moved into the lounge and took a table. Walter found himself liking Monica more and more, and this liking grew in proportion to the drink. The club was already closing when the group poured out into the street. Monica put her arms around Walter's neck and whispered, "Would you like to continue the evening?" "I'd love to," Walter mumbled. "Then let's go back to my place." "Do you have a drink?" she asked, pulling him close to her by his slim waist. "Do you have any?" Walter spent the night at Monica's, and in the morning, barely able to get his head off the pillow, decided to call George. He had to get home somehow, and George hadn't had much to drink last night. Might as well pick him up brotherly. The phone rang with long beeps. No one answered. "You're up, sweetheart." "Good morning." Monica stretched sweetly in bed. She reached over to the bedside table, where a bottle of champagne stood. She poured it into a glass, drank it, and handed it to Walter. "Want some?" "It'll give you a headache." Monica waved her head, tossing her hair over the pillow. "Don't you have anything stronger?" Walter asked. "Come on, anyway." "There's no ride home," he agreed. "What about a taxi? Or do you just not want to go?" Monica wagged her finger at him. Walter fell into the hottie's arms. Finally, tearing themselves away from each other, they lay silent, breathing heavily. Walter was the first to break the silence. "I'm kind of hungry. Should I cook something to eat?" No cooking. "I hate the cooker and everything that goes with it," she said flatly. "Why don't we go out and have lunch?" "Where?" "A restaurant, for example." "Let's do that." Walter decided that this wonderful night must have a beautiful ending. "I'll just make one phone call," he said. "Okay. I'm going to take a shower." Wrapped in a sheet, Monica stalked down the corridor. Tiffany was in a hurry to get home from work. She had to run to the shop to buy cheese and sausage. Today her son would bring his girlfriend to meet her. That thought made her happy. Surely this girl from his work. She's probably smart, kind, and very pretty. There's no other way around it. Her boy won't go out with just anyone. After changing her clothes, the housewife put on an apron and began to prepare dinner. She sent the chicken, carefully marinated since the morning, into the oven and began to prepare the appetizers. In the living room, she spread a beautiful tablecloth on the table and arranged the dishes and utensils. Tiffany was almost ready when the doorbell rang. She hurried into the hallway. "Mom, we're here." Walter greeted her mother cheerfully, kissing her on the cheek. "This is Monica." "Pleased to meet you," the woman replied, looking at the girl with a smile. She looked nothing like the image Tiffany had painted in her mind of her future daughter-in-law, bright, tall, and wearing a short skirt. "I'm Tiffany," she introduced herself. The girl smiled silently back. She looked around the spacious hallway with interest. "Why are we standing here?" "Come into the hall," Tiffany invited her son and his girlfriend. "I'll be right there." The woman went into the kitchen, while Monica continued to turn her head from side to side. "Nice place you have here. Do you live here alone?" "Yes, my father died and it's just me and my mom," Walter said, uncorking a bottle of champagne. "Why don't you get married?" the girl asked. "It had never occurred to me. Maybe I haven't met the one I want to spend my life with," replied the man. "Are you sure? Or maybe your mom doesn't let you?" Monica laughed, and Walter looked at her, not knowing whether she was joking or seriously considering him a mama's boy. "Stop it. I have a great mom," he hugged the girl. Tiffany came into the room. When she saw the young people, she was a little confused. "Well, everything is ready. We can sit down at the table." The woman had a dish with fried chicken in her hands. "It smells so good, Mummy." Walter wiggled his nose. "I love it when you bake chicken with your signature recipe." "Thank you, son," Tiffany replied. Wanting to lighten the mood a little, she turned to Monica. "What do you, Monica, like to cook? Can you share a recipe?" Monica looked at the woman, then at Walter. "I don't like to cook anything," she replied. "I prefer to eat in restaurants or, at the very least, order takeout." It was Tiffany's turn to be surprised. "How can you do that? How are you going to feed your husband and children? After all, we all know the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. That wisdom works, believe me." "So you married Walter's dad because of your chicken frying skills?" Monica asked, not the least bit embarrassed, reaching for the salad. Tiffany stopped chewing for a moment. She thought the question was downright rude and insensitive. The smile slowly slid off the woman's face. She looked at Monica, who was putting on the salad, not noticing that she had said something wrong. Sensing the awkwardness of the situation, Walter tried to gloss over it. "Mummy, Monica wanted to say that you are a very good cook, and Daddy just couldn't help but fall in love with such a good hostess." He looked at Monica. She nodded her head. "Yes, that's what I was going to say," she said, still chewing. The dinner conversation did not go well. After tea and cake, Walter and Monica left. "I'll see Monica off and come back," he kissed his mother on the cheek. She continued to clear the dishes from the table. She did not say goodbye to her guest, showing her displeasure with her son's choice. When the son returned home, Tiffany was about to go to bed. She took a sedative. The woman couldn't get over Walter's girlfriend. She seemed rude, defiant. She was nothing like Tiffany had imagined her future daughter-in-law to be. "Mama, are you still awake?" Walter asked, peering into his mother's bedroom. "No, son," she sighed. "Your friend made my blood pressure skyrocket, and I had to take medicine." "Mom, why do you have to make things so complicated?" The man was indignant. Monica is a normal, modern girl. If she doesn't want to stand at the cooker, she doesn't have to. Nowadays, you can really order ready meals, and the laundry can be delivered to the laundrette. Specially trained people can clean the house too. Why bother? Is it not normal that a woman wants to be beautiful and well-groomed, not tortured by constant cooking, laundry, and cleaning? "Do you think I'm tortured?" Tiffany asked. "Yes, all the years I took care of your father. He always had clean, ironed shirts, and he was always well-fed, and the delicious dumplings we used to make together. Don't you remember? And this one of yours probably has no idea how normal people make dumplings, pies, or where clean linen comes from in the cupboard." "Mom, this is my choice in my life." Walter tried to argue with his mother. "She doesn't want anything from you but money. Look at her. She's dressed like Tiffany almost swore, though she wasn't in the habit of doing that. I'm sorry, God. If your father had seen that tarnished, tastelessly dressed and ill-mannered girl. Here we go. I'm going to bed. I have to get up early tomorrow," said Walter. He walked out of his mother's bedroom, closing the door behind him. Tiffany sat at the dressing table for a while longer, looking at her face in the mirror. Since her husband's death, she had visibly deteriorated. Her face showed signs of fatigue. Maybe I should retire, she thought. It wasn't the first time Tiffany had thought it was time to stop working. Her health was failing more and more. Her eyesight was getting worse. Then there were the computers that now had to be mastered. Tiffany was having a hard time. The younger generation, on the other hand, was getting up to speed and not afraid to work with any software. It's decided I'll talk to the boss tomorrow. If there is a candidate to take my place, I'll make way for the young people and go on a well-deserved holiday, she decided. Walter's mood was high. His trading company was 1 year old. As director and owner, he could see the results. Profits were growing. There were more and more partners, and the accounts were finally beginning to show a substantial amount of money. On this occasion, the man decided to thank his employees and organize a party. The staff took the news with enthusiasm. It was decided to free the meeting room, decorate it, and order catering with snacks, drinks, and dishes from the restaurant. On the appointed day, everyone gathered to celebrate the firm's anniversary. George and Monica were also invited. Dear friends, colleagues, Walter addressed the audience. I am happy that we are celebrating the first birthday of our company. I would like to thank you for believing in the success of our business from day one and doing everything to make it grow, bring us success and profit. Thank you. The people applauded loudly. I had no idea that your employees loved and respected you so much, Monica said, hugging Walter around the neck. All evening she had been showing that she was directly related to the director, that she was not just his girlfriend, but his favorite girl. Monica had far-reaching plans for Walter. Except his mother Tiffany might be a problem. The other day, Walter gave Monica a luxurious fur coat. However, the gift was not bought on the man's initiative. They were driving through town, and Monica saw a fur store. She asked to come in because she really likes beautiful fur coats and mantos. The man was unable to object. The girl drove him crazy, and he could not give up his love adventures with Monica. Laving between the racks of coats and mantos, the girl tried on one or the other. At last she came out to Walter, who was drinking coffee on a sofa, spinning round and round. The blue mink coat was very much to the face of the tall and slender Monica. But the price tag that dangled from the sleeve confused Walter. Honey Monica pouted with greasy scarlet lipstick. "Don't I deserve such a gift from you?" "Look at something else, darling. And preferably this number should be one less zero," the man suggested. "No, I want this one. It suits me very well. Don't you think it's a little overpriced?" "It's overpriced. In Europe you can buy much cheaper." Walter tried to dissuade the girl from buying it. But Monica stood her ground. The man had to agree. "Wrap it up," he said to the saleswoman, slightly damaging his mood. Prevented Walter from rejoicing in the renewal together with Monica, but very soon the girl was able to lift his spirits by dragging him to her house. He returned home at midnight. The morning coffee, prepared by Tiffany, was invigorating and set him up for work. Walter stepped out of the shower and joined his mother. The woman carefully tossed her son a plate of sandwiches. "Did you get home late last night? Did you have to work late?" she asked Walter. "No," he answered briefly. "Where were you then?" Walter put the cup on the table, hesitated for a moment, then answered in an irritated tone. "Mum, what am I, 5 years old? Are you going to control me all my life? Where I want to be, I'll be there. When I want, then I come. What do you care?" "Calm down," Tiffany said. "I was just wondering," Tiffany said. She was startled. Her son had never let her raise her voice before. "It's just that you usually tell me how you spend your time with George," she added. Walter got up from the table, leaving the cup with the unfinished coffee. "I'm out of here. Lots of work. Sorry," he said, and turned around, leaving the kitchen. He didn't even kiss his mother goodbye. The conversation hadn't gone well, and the morning wasn't going well. In fact, Tiffany wanted to tell her son about her decision to take a well-deserved retirement. The day before, she'd talked to the head of human resources at the plant. And it turned out she'd been wanting her niece to take Tiffany's place for a long time. But only she was shy to say, because Tiffany had worked at the same place all her life and was honored by the bosses. The issue had resolved itself in a fortnight. The woman would be retiring, giving way to a new generation. Now she wondered how her son would react. Surely he would be pleased. Tiffany was already making plans. First, she wanted to buy a trip to a sanatorium. She'd wanted to go to Karlovy Vary in the Czech Republic for a long time. True, she would have to ask Walter to pay back some of the money she had lent him a year ago to start a business. But her son was apparently doing well, and he would give her the money. And then, when she got back from her trip, she'd renovate the flat. It will be necessary to hire a good team of workers to do everything qualitatively and quickly. And in the renovated flat, she would be able to live out her life. That was Tiffany's plan as she planned to leave work. But that evening, Walter didn't come home again. After work, he went to Monica's house, taking her favorite champagne on the way. After a pleasant time, they lay cuddled together. "Walter," the girl murmured. "How about it?" What he said. "Will you marry me?" "What do you mean yours? Yes or no?" She whispered caressingly in his ear. "I will," Walter answered. "When?" Monica persisted. "Tomorrow, isn't it?" Walter finally came to his senses and looked at the girl. "Are we that bad or what?" he asked. Monica reached over to the nightstand for a packet of cigarettes. "I knew it," she said resentfully. "I knew you were just like all men. You come to me, and then you marry some gray mouse." "What made you think that?" the man asked, opening the window to light a cigarette. "If you wanted to marry me, you would have proposed already. What am I, a girl for an hour or something?" "Don't talk nonsense," Walter said. "Don't I give you money? I don't buy you presents. I don't fulfill your wishes." "That's all right. But a wife is something else. If a man marries, he proves his love. You love me, don't you?" "I do." All right, if that's the way you want it, we'll get married. He put out his cigarette. Then come to me, my little cat. Walter couldn't resist Monica. A few days later, he picked Monica up after work and they went to his house to tell Tiffany that they were getting married. To mark the occasion, the girl wore a new fur coat Walter had bought her. Let his mother see that he spared nothing for her. Tiffany wasn't expecting any guests. She wasn't feeling well today. Her blood pressure spiked and she had to take some medicine. She lay on the sofa in the living room and turned on the television softly. When she heard the sound of the door opening in the hallway, she didn't get up. She knew it was her son. "Mom, you're home. We're home," shouted Walter from the hallway, helping Monica out of her outerwear. Realizing that her son had not returned alone, Tiffany got up from the couch. Walter and Monica entered the room. "Hi, were you resting or something?" the man asked. "Yeah, I wasn't feeling well," the mother replied. "Hello, Tiffany." Monica tried to appear polite, but still caused negative emotions in Tiffany, which she could hardly hide. "Hello, Monica. Come on in." "I'll put the kettle on." The woman went into the kitchen, but Monica beat her to it. "Don't worry, sit down, rest, I'll do it myself," Monica said. "Yes, Walter, go ahead." He lightly slapped her just below her back. But Tiffany noticed his gesture and wrinkled her nose, disliking the girl even more. When everyone was seated at the table, Monica elbowed Walter in the side. She couldn't wait for him to tell her mother that they were getting married soon. "Mom, Monica and I have something we want to tell you." Walter began, trying to keep his tone solemn, but he hesitated a little. "Why are you slowing down, Walter?" said the girl loudly and clearly, not waiting for the groom to make up his mind to announce the news. "Tiffany, we're getting married." Tiffany sighed and stared into her teacup. "Oh, and yet the contagion is unapologetic," she thought. "Yes, Mum, tomorrow we'll go and apply at the registry office. There are some people we know there, so we won't have to wait long. I think we can get married in a month." "What's the rush? Is she pregnant?" The woman nodded towards Monica, not even wanting to say her name. "Are you crazy?" The girl was indignant. "I'm pregnant." "Well, no, that's not me. It's just that usually those who are in such a hurry are those who have noticed a baby in their sin. Normal people prepare for a wedding deliberately, thinking about every step," Tiffany said calmly and judiciously. "Walter, have you heard? According to your mother, we're not normal people." "I'm shocked." "Walter, why aren't you saying anything?" Monica echoed loudly. "Keep it down, please," Walter's mother asked. "I have a terrible headache." "Mom, it's what we decided," said the man calmly. "It's out of the question. We came with Monica to tell you the news first." "Thank you for that," sighed the mother. She sipped her tea, took a candy from the vase and slowly unwrapped the wrapper. "Aren't you glad? Don't you have anything more to say?" "I'm glad when you're happy. That's all I can tell you," Tiffany replied. "But since you come to me with news, I have something to tell you." The couple stared at the woman in surprise. Taking another bite of her chocolate candy, Tiffany finished her tea. "As of Monday, I'm taking a well-deserved holiday. I've decided that I've had enough of working, and it's time to take a break," she said. "Congratulations, Mum." "It's about time," Walter exclaimed. "Wait, don't interrupt me and listen," the mother continued, looking into her son's eyes. "First of all, I want you to know that I want to have a healthy holiday. That's why I plan to buy a trip to Karlovy Vary. There is good air, mineral springs, all conditions for treatment of my arthritis and hypertension." "That's great. I support this idea and I'm happy for you," Walter replied. "While I'm in the Czech Republic, I'll need to renovate my flat," Tiffany continued. "So I've decided to hire a team of decorators and have them do it right, so I don't have to think about how to fix it up later. I think it'll be enough to last me a lifetime." Walter looked round the kitchen. The flat really should have been renovated a long time ago. Especially nowadays, everything was done with beautiful, modern materials. And if they brought in a designer, they could make a luxury flat out of their 3-bedroom. "In that connection, Walter, I'd like to ask you to return the money I gave you for your business. I'm going to need it now," Tiffany said. Walter looked up and stared at his mother. Monica looked at her lover in surprise. It was obvious that he was confused. His mother's desire to get the money back came as a surprise to the man. To be honest, he had already forgotten, thanks to whom he was able to start so successfully and turn the firm, as they call it, from scratch. I hope to get it next week, because I have to pay for the trip and give a deposit to the construction team, the mother added. The woman calmly finished her tea, pretending not to notice how puzzled her son was. Monica did not understand anything at all. Only one thing was clear to her: the wedding seemed to be on the verge of failure. It was not enough for the girl to sign and become Walter's wife. She dreamed of a lavish wedding with a museum restaurant and a huge number of guests. Monica was the first to break the silence in the kitchen. "You know what, Tiffany? You should be ashamed to ask Walter for money. He's your own son, not a creditor. And besides, we have a big event coming up. Do you want us to celebrate our wedding in the dining room?" "Shut up," Walter said quietly. But Monica was unstoppable. "You're old. You don't need much. Buy yourself a trip to a boarding house in Los Angeles County and relax for a month. You can renovate it in 2 or 3 years. What, do you have to have celebrities here so you can do a fancy renovation?" "Shut up, Monica." Walter tried to calm the girl down. "No, Walter, I will not shut up. I'm your wife for 5 minutes, and therefore I have the right to decide where to spend your money. If I say there's going to be a wedding, there's going to be a wedding, or you'll never see me again." The girl literally jumped from the table, quickly dressed, and slammed the door. Walter tried to rush after her, but Tiffany stopped him abruptly. "Sit down, I haven't finished," she said. Confused, the man slumped back in his chair. "That's a lot of money," he said. "You have to be warned about such things in advance. This money is still in circulation. Soon we'll have to pay for another shipment of goods. It's not even one lorry, but several. Do you realize how much money that is?" "I have no idea, and I don't want to think about it," Tiffany said firmly. "When you needed the money, I gave it to you with no terms or conditions. I was counting on your integrity. Now I need it, and I want it back without disrupting my plans." "Mom, don't you care about my plans?" Walter asked indignantly. "I come to you, tell you I'm getting married, that Monica and I are going to celebrate the wedding in a restaurant. And you don't react to that? How am I supposed to react, son? It's your life, your decision." "What does that have to do with me?" Walter asked. "What does it have to do with you? You should at least be happy and at most help me," Tiffany replied. "No, my dear. Everything I had to do, I did for you. You're an adult. You're well into your 30s, so the word should doesn't apply to me now. It's up to you to look after, protect, and support your mother in her old age. Or do you have a different opinion?" "You're being unfair by denying me the opportunity to marry," Walter said sadly. "I'm not stopping you. Marry whoever you want to marry. Give me the money. And let's end this pointless conversation." Tiffany left the kitchen and went to her bedroom. Walter sat there thinking. He was working out in his mind how to get out of this situation without arguing with his mother and Monica, and without losing profits at the firm. He did have to pay for another shipment of goods, and it was quite a large sum. He dialed Monica's number, deciding to go to her to discuss everything, and at the same time to stay at her place for the night. But she didn't answer the phone. She's offended, Walter thought. He switched off the kitchen light and left the flat. Getting into his car, the man headed for his mistress's house. The light in her window was on. Walter noticed this as he drove up to Monica's house. But when he rang the doorbell, no one answered. The man started pounding on the door with his fist. "Monica, open up, we need to talk." Footsteps were heard outside the door. Walter breathed out a sigh of relief. "What do you want?" Monica asked through the door. "Talk. We already did. I thought you were a man. Turns out you can't make up your mind without your mummy." "Yes, I can, honey. Open up," Walter asked. The door opened softly. A man stepped into the hallway. Monica stood with her back against the wall, her lips down and her eyes on the floor. Her whole appearance showed how much she resented Walter and his mother. "Well, aren't you sorry, honey?" The man tried to hug her, but Monica pushed him away. tell me. Who do you want to live with, Mummy or me? Monica asked. Of course with you, my love, answered Walter. Then why don't you consider me at all? Do I have to get married in a dressing gown? And my guests will eat Olivier and potatoes with cutlets in the dining room. Don't worry, it won't happen. You just have to wait a little longer, Walter urged her. I don't want to wait. Can't your mother wait with her silly whims? Monica was indignant. I don't know, dear, but we'll think of something together. So he pulled the girl against him and quietly pushed her towards the bedroom. Monica gave in. She knew what strings Walter could pull. Then, lying in bed, they thought of a plan of action. Should we send your mother to a relative? Monica asked. Why? Walter didn't understand. To keep her out of the way. Don't you understand? Let her stay here. We'll have a wedding in the meantime. And when she gets here, you'll give her the money, or part of the debt. She doesn't even have any relatives. Walter puffed on his cigarette. She had relatives. Only her father and mother lived in a remote village, but they died a long time ago. I was just a kid. Where is this village? The mistress asked. Somewhere in Montana. And I didn't seem to go into much detail. Didn't her parents leave her daughter anything when she died? If there's no one else, she must have inherited something. Oh, please don't be ridiculous. What inheritance is there in a remote village? It's a small house, but it's probably rotten by now. My mother once went to my parents' grave and told me that almost all the houses in the village were abandoned. Everything was dead. Monica raised herself up on her elbows and looked carefully into Walter's eyes. There was triumph in her gaze. That's the way out, my dear, she whispered, smiling. Walter arrived home on time on the appointed day. Tiffany noticed that Walter was acting strangely, always trying to give her something. Then he called her to have tea together and talk. After the fight the other day, they'd hardly spoken. But apparently the son had come to his senses and realized that his mother was right. Walter poured the aromatic tea he'd brewed himself into cups and moved the sugar to Tiffany. How are things going at the firm, son? The woman asked. It's fine, as usual. We're working, making progress. You know we're not going backwards, Walter said, smiling. The mother thought his smile was strained, unnatural. What do? Did you go to a travel agency? Tiffany began to tell her, but her son interrupted her, asking for a clean hand towel. The woman went to her room, and he quickly pulled a vial from his pocket and dribbled it into his mother's cup. It was a sleeping pill. Here you go. The mother handed Walter a towel. Thank you, Mum. Now you can drink your tea in peace. You drink too. As they talked, the woman drank the whole cup and suddenly felt faint. She leaned against the wall. I don't feel well, Walter, she said. But the man had already taken her in his arms and carried her into the room. He laid her on the sofa and hurried into the hallway to open the front door. She's asleep. Everything worked out, Monica asked as she entered the flat. Yes, I think she's asleep. We're in a hurry. We have to get there before she wakes up. Walter took his mother in his arms and Monica grabbed a blanket and pillow from the couch. They left the flat and walked down to the courtyard. The man put his mother in the back seat, placing a pillow under her head, and covered her with the blanket. Opening the boot, he threw in Tiffany's warm clothes that Monica had collected. Several bags of groceries stood nearby. Slamming the doors, Walter and Monica hit the road. As they pulled onto the motorway, Walter increased his speed. He drove as fast as he could, afraid that his mother would wake up and his and Monica's plan would fail. By 5 a.m., they reached the remote village where Tiffany had been born and raised. They found her parents' house. There was hardly any snow in town, but here it was knee-deep. Walter made his way to the gate and struggled to open it, and then the door to the house. He went back to the car, carried his mother into the hut, and put her on the bed. Where should I put the groceries? Monica asked. She was standing in the doorway holding the bags. Over there on the table, Walter pointed. He covered the mother with a blanket and put a coat on top to keep her warm. Let's go, Monica. They closed the door and drove away. They glimpsed abandoned houses with boarded-up shutters. lit by headlights. Tiffany woke up and felt terribly cold. She struggled to open her eyes. Her head hurt badly. She tried to get up, but fell back onto the bed, feeling completely powerless. "Where am I?" thought the woman. There were wooden walls all around. Faint daylight shone through the boarded-up windows. It took a while for Tiffany to realize that she was in her parents' house. But how she had come to be here, the woman didn't understand. The last thing she remembered was Walter giving her tea. And then darkness. "Masters, is anyone there?" There was a man's voice. There was a banging on the door. Tiffany tried to answer, but her tongue stuck to her mouth. "Hey," came another shout from outside. "I'm here," she said in a hoarse whisper. Her throat ached terribly. The door opened. A man with a gray beard, wearing a warm jacket and a winter hat, appeared on the threshold. When he saw the woman lying on the bed under some things, he rushed to her. "Who are you? What's the matter with you?" he asked Tiffany, patting her cheeks. "Are you all right?" "It's cold," she whispered. "Now wait, let me help you." The man grabbed a blanket, wrapped it around Tiffany, threw off his jacket and covered her with it, tucking it under her side. "How did you end up here? No one's been here in ages." She stared at him, unable to say a word. A man ran out of the house in a jumper. He was back in a minute. "I'll get some wood. I'll heat the stove. It'll be warm. You just put your head down for now. Wait a bit." In a few minutes, the wood was crackling in the stove. Tiffany could see the glow of scarlet flame through the crack in the door. The cooker was warped and wouldn't close tightly. "I see you've made a good home here. How much groceries did you bring?" Tiffany turned her head and saw the man looking at the bags on the table. She warmed up a little and began to come round. The woman realized that Walter had brought her here to keep her. She was against his wedding, and she demanded the money back. Meanwhile, the man had put a cloth rucksack on the table. "I'll pour you some hot tea. You'll warm up quickly," he said, and took a thermos out of the rucksack. He unscrewed the lid of the glass and poured the hot, aromatic drink into it. Taking a seat next to Tiffany on the bed, he helped her up. "Here you go. It's delicious." "Thank you." The woman took a few sips and thanked him. "What's this?" "I make it myself. It's rosehip, hawthorn, and some other herbs." The man replied. "Do you feel better?" "Yes, I'm almost completely warmed up." "And I'm walking, looking at the tracks of a car. From it, footprints lead to the house," began to tell the stranger. "No one has been in this house for ages, and now hello guests have arrived. So I thought I'd go in and check who had arrived. And here you are." "Who are you?" Tiffany asked. As she drank the hot tea, she felt invigorated. Her headache was gone. "Oh, forgive me, you old fool. I forgot to introduce myself," the man apologized. "I'm Oscar, the local forester." "Oscar? How strange," Tiffany said thoughtfully. "Why strange?" The man didn't understand. Tiffany sat up on the bed. She felt the warmth of the house. The crackling logs in the cooker warmed not only her body but also her soul. She looked round the room. The colored wallpaper had almost completely fallen off the walls. The ceiling looked back at her. Old curtains were hanging from the windows. "My mum made them when I was a girl. This is my home. You see, I grew up here, lived with my parents, then went to the city to study and stayed there. My daddy's name was Oscar. He was a forester in those days. Everyone in the neighborhood respected him. He was a very good man." Oscar listened in surprise at first, and then he laughed. "So I'm a forester too. Oscar, like your father. What a coincidence. I never would have guessed. And of course I've heard that a very good man used to be a forester here. But I didn't know we were namesakes." Oscar laughed again. "How did you end up here? Where are your relatives and friends? The car you came in? I saw the tracks. A Jeep or some other off-road vehicle?" "I don't know," Tiffany said sadly. I guess I don't have any family or loved ones anymore." The forester took her hand in his, noticing the sadness of her new acquaintance. "Don't jump to conclusions. Things happen in life," he sighed tiredly. Then he squared his shoulders and spoke in a cheerful voice. "If you've decided to stay here, you'll have to put the house in order. I'll help you. Do you mind?" "No, not at all." Tiffany smiled. Who wouldn't want help under these circumstances? "Thank you." All day long, Oscar and Tiffany tidied up the house. The first thing the man did was to take away the boards that had been used to board up the windows and fix the doors, which had fallen apart. Tiffany got to work scrubbing the floors and windows. After removing the old curtains, she poured water into a basin and prepared to wash. But Oscar stopped her. "You shouldn't have such old curtains in the house, Tiffany." "So what am I going to do without curtains?" "We'll put up new ones," Oscar said confidently. "Where are we going to get them?" wondered the woman. "If we look hard enough, we'll find them," said the forester in a mysterious tone. Tiffany shrugged her shoulders. The day was drawing to a close. Tiffany had already boiled the potatoes, cut the sausage, and opened a can of stew. "Your son was very thoughtful, not daring to leave him in the woods without food," Oscar said, but he immediately regretted it. Tiffany grew sad again, thinking, "Yes, that's the way it is, raising my only son. You spare nothing for him, and he takes you to the woods, to a cold hut," she sighed. "Don't worry so much, Tiffany. People live everywhere, and you're your own here. This is your homeland. The Karelian forest. It has some kind of ancestral memory, protects those who were born and grew up under its pines. Everything will be all right." "I know," the man smiled. Tiffany thought, "What brings him here? He's certainly not from around here." Tiffany and Oscar became friends. The woodsman visited the woman every day, helping her with chores. Oscar fixed furniture that Tiffany remembered from when she was a little girl. He brought water, helped with firewood. Tiffany fed him a delicious lunch. "I saw lights on in some of the houses, people living. I guess they're not leaving," she asked Oscar one day. "They are. There are 10 houses left from the whole village," he replied. "Mostly the ones the children don't need, and the lonely old people." "What do they do here? Who keeps cattle?" "The vegetable garden feeds them. They go to the forest to gather berries and mushrooms. They catch fish in the lake, then sell them in town, and there's nothing else to do here. Televisions aren't always on." "Do they have televisions in the houses?" Tiffany got excited. She was bored alone. She was also bored with the soap operas she liked to watch in the city in the evenings. "Yes, but the connection sometimes goes down, especially in the winter." Tiffany suddenly got up from the table and went to the wardrobe. There were things that Miles had hastily thrown into bags. She found among them her card, which was to be used to pay the woman's work and pension. Here she handed the card to the forester. "This is my card." "What is it?" The man didn't understand. "I beg you, let's go to the shop and buy me a TV set." "Please," she asked, her palms folded across her chest. Oscar thought for a moment. The nearest shop was 80 kilometers away. It would take all day to get there and back. But Tiffany looked at him with such pleading eyes that he couldn't refuse her. "All right, we'll take my car tomorrow," the man agreed. Tiffany smiled happily. She was growing to like this strong man with such a familiar name. He reminded her very much of her father. 2 months passed, summer came. One warm evening, Oscar and Tiffany were having tea in the yard. The forester had made a small table. Tiffany tied a tablecloth on it. The trees swayed quietly around them, enjoying the pleasant company and tranquility. The woman suddenly thought that nothing ever just happens. Perhaps she should have come back here a long time ago, she wondered to herself. She liked preparing the vegetable garden for planting. She liked setting up the house, making it cozy. Tiffany, Oscar said to her, "You and I are both old. We live here together and we don't seem to get bored." "What's there to be bored about?" "I'll plant a vegetable garden soon and then I'll take care of it," Tiffany told him. "Yes, a vegetable garden is certainly something to do. But that's not what I meant." "Well, Tiffany, let's live together." The woman looked at Oscar in surprise. In his kind eyes there was so much hope, warmth, life experience. We're hardly ever apart, Oscar. I mean, let's live together, run the household, and watch your TV series in the evenings. He looked so touching in his uncertainty that Tiffany couldn't stand it and held out her hand to him. Come on, Oscar. It really is more fun together. Without hiding his joy, the man put his arms around Tiffany, held her tightly against him, and stroked her gray hair. One day, returning from the forest, Oscar brought a small fawn into the house. The animal was wounded and looked weak, almost lifeless. What's wrong with it, Oscar? Tiffany asked, putting aside the basin of laundry. He's trapped, the little fellow. I guess the poachers were at it again. I had to rescue the little lynx. Wow, a lynx. He's healthier than a big cat, said Oscar. Bring the first aid kit, please. He treated the wound on the lynx's leg, applied a bandage with ointment, and calmed the animal down. He'll stay with us for a while and then we'll see. An old dog box was re-equipped for the lynx. We had to renew the boards and make an enclosure out of metal mesh. The lynx was named Rex. This was the name of the previous owner of the box. But he was a dog, not a wild cat. The pet was very affectionate, licking Tiffany's hand as she stroked and bandaged him. A few days later, Oscar returned with a large box. There were 12 chickens in it. That's not nothing, he said proudly, showing Tiffany the chickens lurking at the bottom of the carton. Now we'll always have fresh eggs. Oh my God, Oscar, where are we going to keep them? Tiffany spluttered. It's not a problem. Tomorrow morning I'll start building a chicken coop, and then I'll build a stable. We'll have a cow, goats, geese, piglets. We'll have our own farm. Tiffany only shook her head, smiling and enjoying Oscar's thriftiness. It was not a problem for him to get the wood to build buildings. That's why Oscar decided not to be petty. And in just a month, not only the barn, the chicken coop and the pen for geese and ducks, but also a new bathhouse grew in the yard of the house. Tiffany was overjoyed when the first smoke appeared from the chimney. In time, we'll renovate the house, Oscar promised. As long as I have the strength, I'll do it all. Once a month, Tiffany and Oscar drove into town to withdraw money from their cards and get Oscar's salary. At the same time, they would stop by the market and sell eggs, milk, and poultry to the vendors. The price was not high, but they did not want to trade themselves. They had to go back and do farming. Having made the necessary purchases, they would go home. One day on their way back, they noticed a car on a forest road. It's not ours, some tourists, probably, Oscar suggested and pulled up next to the unfamiliar car. Hello, do you need any help? Good evening. A man in his 40s approached Oscar. My car broke down. No matter how hard I try, it won't start. Let me have a look, the forester offered. He looked under the bonnet of the foreign car, touched and moved something. It's bad, it needs repair, said Oscar. Where is there to repair? Asked the man. I looked on the navigator. There are no settlements nearby. 2 boys of about 8 or 10 years old jumped out of the strange man's car. They were followed by a woman. Oscar looked at the family and said decisively, "Let's go to our place. Tomorrow morning I'll take you to the service. There's a cable." The men hooked the foreign car with the cable, and everyone settled down. Oscar dragged the broken car to the village. "Here we are," he said. And Tiffany, inviting the guests in, added, "Come inside." She led the woman and her children inside. It turned out they had traveled a long way. "We've wanted to see the local sights for a long time, but the car was a little slow," the woman said. "My name is Natalie, and these are our sons Miles and Nicholas." The boys sat down near the enclosure with a lynx, looking at it in surprise. Everything in the house and in the yard seemed strange. In the evening, everyone gathered round the table outside. Oscar and Natalie's husband Travis grilled meat on the barbecue, and the women prepared vegetables and herbs. For such an occasion, Oscar got a bottle of moonshine from somewhere. To getting acquainted to meeting. "Here's to your car being repaired quickly," he said, pouring it into shot glasses. Everyone present supported him. The evening was wonderful. Natalie put the children to bed in the house. They barely made it to bed. The hosts and guests all sat around talking, drinking fragrant tea with forest herbs. And the next day, Travis's car was taken to the service center. It turned out that it would be ready only the next day, and the men returned to Oscar and Tiffany's house. The guests had brightened up the homeowners' lives. All day the boys tended to the animals, fed carrots to the rabbits, carried hay for the cow and collected eggs in the henhouse, and then drank steamed milk. Travis and Oscar chopped wood and stacked it in a neat stack, and the women cooked meals. In the evening, everyone went to the lake, swam and boated, and when they returned, a real bathhouse was waiting for them. It was a wonderful weekend. Thank you, the guests thanked the hospitable hosts. We could not even imagine that this is such a wonderful holiday, and we really enjoyed it. Come back again, Oscar said, shaking Travis' hand in farewell. You bet we will, and we'll bring our friends with us, he promised, as the car with the new friends drove off down the street. Oscar said to Tiffany, I think it's time to start building guest houses. All summer, Tiffany worked in the vegetable garden, harvesting crops and making preparations for the winter. Oscar got serious about building an addition to the house. He enjoyed having visitors, and in his heart he hoped that Travis would keep his promise and come on holiday to visit them. The man and woman went to the woods to pick berries and mushrooms, made jam and pickled vegetables, and in the long winter Tiffany knitted warm socks, mittens, and other things from the rabbit's wool. So the winter flew by, followed by spring. The elderly couple's household gradually expanded, and the chores became more troublesome. One evening they were finishing digging a plot of land for planting potatoes, when suddenly a few cars drove up to the house one after another. Who's that, Oscar? Tiffany wondered. Let's see, replied her husband, and went to the gate. Travis walked towards him. Well done, master, he shouted when he saw Oscar. How are you? Are you well? Healthy, thank God, he said. Tiffany, look who's here. The men hugged each other, happy to see each other. Will you take me in? I want to stay for a week, go fishing, walk in the woods, just relax, Travis asked. Why do you ask? We are only glad to have such guests. Oscar smiled, patting his friend on the shoulder. But you see, I didn't come alone. How many of you are there? Asked the owner. Is this all of you coming to our place? He pointed to the cars. Yeah, we'll sort it out among the guests. People started pouring out of the cars. Men, women, children. And before Tiffany could catch her breath, she was surrounded by young women, shaking hands and calling out their names, asking her where to take her things and her groceries. To the house, girls, to the house, Tiffany replied, confused. Gradually, things calmed down and there was no more fuss. The women began to prepare the food, and the men set up some tents in the yard. What clever people, Tiffany thought. The children had beds in the house and the adults were in the yard. The noise, the fun, the joy of the children's voices settled into Tiffany and Oscar's previously quiet home for a week. The children enjoyed feeding the animals, going to the lake with their parents, and playing outside. The women helped Tiffany, even though she refused to help. After all, people were here on holiday. The men had plenty to do all day long, and they enjoyed it all because of the variety. Oscar even took the guests hunting. And how they enjoyed fishing. Tiffany collected gifts for the guests: socks and mittens made of rabbit wool, jam made of wild berries, pickled and salted mushrooms, and smoked fish caught by the guests themselves. For a long time the hosts hugged and could not part with their guests. They had become so close during that week, and when the townspeople left, Tiffany found money and a card under the tablecloth in the room, wishing them well and hoping they would meet again. So we've made our first money on our farm, Oscar smiled happily. He felt that soon there would be new guests in the house, and he was not mistaken. A week later, another group of 3 families arrived. Travis told me you guys have a great holiday here, said a man named Scott. It's a good holiday. Come on in the yard, Oscar said. Rumors abound, but good things come to good. A few years flew by unnoticed. Now, from May to September, tourists from different cities came to visit Tiffany and Oscar, some for a day or two, and some for a week. Oscar had built several summer houses, bought 2 boats, and installed a drip irrigation system. People from megalopolises and noisy cities liked to relax surrounded by wild, untouched nature. The hosts did not demand payment for accommodation and did not set any rates. After all, the guests helped them in many ways. But the tourists always left money, which Oscar invested in new buildings, the purchase of fodder for cattle and other necessary things. That day they were waiting for the next guests. "Look, someone is coming." Oscar shouted to the woman. "I think it's ours." A black Jeep stopped at the gate, and a man got out. He looked with surprise at the good house with beautiful carved plate bands, at the strange man, at the links in the enclosure. "Don't you recognize him?" "My son is here," Tiffany said quietly, shielding her eyes from the sun with her hand. She took a few steps forward and smiled, bowing her head. "Hello, son." "Hello." Walter's legs gave out at the sight of his mother, healthy, beautiful, and cheerful. He hugged his mother and sobbed, stroking her head. Tiffany softly spoke the words that Oscar had once said to her. "This is our homeland here, son, the Maine woods. It somehow keeps the memory of our ancestors alive, protects those who were born and raised beneath its pines. It's going to be okay. I know it will." Peter sat at the kitchen table and smoked one cigarette after another through the open window. It was frosty, but the cold coming into the apartment from the street did not bother the man. He was in such a state that such trifles did not bother him now. Outside the window came a gray, dull dawn. The meeting with the notary would be at 11 o'clock in the morning, and there was still plenty of time. Sarah Lenina was sleeping sweetly in her bedroom, wrapped in warm blankets. Unlike Retheg, she's clearly happy about the whole situation, and it's strangely repulsive. And just a couple months ago, Peter had considered this girl to be the ideal. She was beautiful, decisive, ambitious, intelligent. When necessary, jokes appropriately. When necessary, will put a man in his place. And most importantly, tender and loving, a real woman. Next to such men, feel strong, necessary. Not like Barbara. Peter's heart ached again because she was his wife. She was not a stranger to him. Despite the presence of Sagalinina, despite everything that had happened recently, Barbara remained for him a queen. They had met while they were still students. The girl was conquering the faculty of finance and economics. Peter studied at the law school. No, the guy never particularly dreamed of becoming a lawyer. Since childhood, he read a lot. He especially liked stories about relationships, love, passion, hatred, fear. It was interesting to unravel the intentions of the characters, to speculate about why they act in this or that way. No wonder that his essays on literature were the most profound and interesting. The teacher even read out some fragments in front of the class. He also drew a lot. His desk drawer was full of albums with all kinds of drawings. There were fantastic creatures, courageous warriors, and just unusual ornaments. Drawing was soothing, peaceful, and time-consuming. Peter himself did not understand how it happened. He seemed to sit down at the table to do algebra, distracted for a minute to finish drawing another character, and everything falls out of reality. He comes to his senses, and only then realizes with surprise that he spent several hours drawing. The boy was clearly a creative person, but his parents were not satisfied with this. Mother and father seemed to agree on only one thing. They both felt that their son needed a serious profession. And, well, the father had some connections. So Peter ended up at a prestigious law school. True, the study did not cause the slightest interest. But parents argued that you need to study, otherwise you will not achieve anything in life, and Peter used to believe his parents and obey them. But at university, he met Barbara. Peter noticed her in his first year. She had such an interesting appearance. She wasn't beautiful, no, but there was something aristocratic in the girl's appearance. Not for nothing she was called Queen Barbara. Snow-white skin, beautiful intelligent eyes of a dark shade of black shiny hair, always smoothly styled, clear cheekbones, nose with a slight hunch and a confident line of lips, and most importantly, regal posture and sharp, but still surprisingly graceful movements. Later, Peter learned that the girl as a child attended a ballet studio, which she hated with all her soul. Parents insisted that the girl must move beautifully, and the guy understood her very much. His parents also knew what was best for him. She was constantly busy doing something. She didn't just look like a businesswoman, she was one, participated in some contests and conferences from the university, worked part-time. Peter didn't know how he got so much information about this girl. She did not notice him at all, did not even know about the existence of such a modest, quiet guy. But Peter was in love with her. He then attracted a completely different type of girl, but for some reason he did not let her out of his sight. Peter was in his 4th year of college. It was summer weather. The middle of May, the time of credits, the time to get admission to the session. The boy went out for a walk to the ice cream stand. Since morning he had been studying thick notebooks with notes, preparing for tomorrow's test, and decided to take a break. He was about to round the corner of the neighboring house when he heard a growl behind him, and a startled exhale from somewhere far away. That sound was what made Retag turn around. He hadn't expected to see such a thing, Barbara. Previously, the guy had only seen her in the walls of the university. Peter knew that the girl lived somewhere in the center, rented an apartment, since she was not local. From somewhere, either from a village or from a regional town. And here she was, right next to his house. Strange, but there was no opportunity to ponder it for long. Growling and crouching to the ground, 2 large dogs approached the girl. There were a lot of dogs here lately. There was a construction site nearby, so the animals lived somewhere behind the fence. The builders fed them at first, but then the construction stopped. Temporarily or permanently, he didn't know. Now, hungry packs were roaming the neighborhood. There were attacks on people. Now 2 dogs were attacking their prey. The girl noticed the boy's look, and so much hope was in her eyes that he, always a bit cowardly and indecisive, simply could not act otherwise. Grabbing a large boulder from the ground, he headed straight for the dogs. The boy thought that if the dogs came at him, at least one of them would be able to hit him over the head with the rock. Maybe even stun the beast for a while. But what to do afterward? There's still a second dog here. There was no time to think about it. Just like that, he had become a hero. The guy approached the girl and asked, trying to make his voice sound firm, not shaking. "Are you okay? They didn't do anything to you?" No, the girl shook her head, looking at her savior with gratitude. "Thank you very much." I was confused. The girl was transforming before her eyes from a confused and frightened, fragile victim into herself, into a queen. Her acquired firmness and her movements and voice confidence. Yes, we have hungry dogs running around, attacking many. Pity them, on the one hand. In the end, it's all our fault, humans, she sighed. Listen, weren't you in a hurry? No, Peter answered honestly. Then can I ask you a favor? Walk me, please, because I'm confused here, and I'm afraid to run into dogs again, to be honest. Will you walk me? The boy felt like a real hero. Queen Barbara herself is counting on him. Wow. Of course I will. The guy took her the long way on purpose, though he could have taken a shortcut through the courtyards. It was just nice to walk and talk to her like that. The girl turned out to be a wonderful conversationalist, intelligent, attentive, understanding. It turned out that they liked the same books. Who would have thought it? But no matter how he looped around, eventually the street grew in front of the 2 companions. Well, here we are. Thanks again. I'm here to see a classmate. We agreed to study for our midterms together. I study at a state university. I know he smiled, pleased with the effect of his confession. Barbara was surprised. How do you know? I study there too, in law school. I've just seen you many times, that's all. By the way, I have a test tomorrow too. What a small world. Well, since we're at the same university, we'll see each other again. The girl smiled charmingly and disappeared down the driveway. That day, the boy could not think of anything but the deep, dark eyes of the queen. It was good that at least he was almost ready for the test. He had never felt any romantic feelings for this girl before, though he knew her, saw her, kept her in his sight. And now, when they talked to each other, it was as if she had conjured him up. It was her pleasant, literate speech, respectful attitude, unexpected weakness, fear of stray dogs. The girl was now attracted to him like a magnet. The guy hoped that they would see each other at the university the very next day. And so they did. Not entirely by chance, though. Peter deliberately went to the floor where the economists had a test. As if by accident, he passed by the classroom, near which students were jostling, and saw Barbara. She also noticed him, nodded to the guy, and even hurried to meet him. At first they were just friends, talking and walking together a lot. Even went to the movies for movies they both looked forward to. Fortunately, their taste was specific, so they went to such sessions only the two of them, without extra eyes and ears. The boy admired Barbara, enjoyed her closeness. He really wanted to take her hand, maybe even kiss her, but she acted like a friend, like a buddy, and the guy was afraid of spoiling everything, so he didn't show his feelings. It was better to stay friends than to feel awkward every time they met. He didn't want to ruin the warm buddy relationship that had already emerged. And then they found themselves at a common student party, a disco in honor of the end of the next academic year. 5th year ahead, graduation. Almost the whole road to higher education is behind them. Something to celebrate. Peter watched Barbara dancing with the other guys and was wildly jealous. No, the girl didn't owe him anything. They weren't even considered a couple. Peter himself was also free to dance with whoever he wanted, but these guys hugging each other in a dance with her. They caused fury and rage, an unpleasant feeling of storm, but he did not show his face. He joked and laughed with his friends, even participated in stupid contests. And then, already late in the evening when everything was over, the girl herself came up to him. The guy noticed that the girl was not quite sober. Officially, strong drinks were forbidden at this party. But of course they were in fact present here. "Don't you like me at all?" Barbara asked in a stunningly direct tone. "Of course you do." Peter clapped his eyes together in confusion. He hadn't expected to hear such a thing. "I mean, as a girl," she explained. "I'm not pretty, my nose is hunchbacked, my lips are thin, I'm tall, too skinny, no shape whatsoever. Do you like other girls?" And she was almost right. A few months ago, the guy really liked other girls, girls of so-called model looks. But now there was no one prettier and more attractive than him. Probably now was the right moment to tell about it, but for some reason the right words could not be found. But the girl was very talkative. "Didn't you notice how I feel about you? We are so much in touch, and all this time I'm waiting for a sign from you, something that would allow me to think that you also like me. But you only see me as a friend, don't you, and now I've ruined everything." Peter shook his head negatively, staring at the girl. "So be it. I'll finally tell you what I think. I'm in love with you. Can you believe it? I always thought I liked more masculine, more brutal guys, like athletes. I tried to hang out with this basketball player, and he was dumb. He's a pussy. And all the other guys I hung out with were dumb. And you're not. You're different. Smart. Understanding, real." Peter smiled. He was pleased to hear her say that. He didn't know what to say in response, so he just hugged her to him. The girl put her head on his shoulder and continued her monologue. "I danced with them all today, just because of you, just to make you jealous. But you remained indifferent. It hurts so much. You don't understand anything," Peter sighed. "You're as stupid as I am." "What do you mean?" The girl pulled away and looked into his eyes with interest. And then he did what he had dreamed of doing for so long. He kissed the girl. They started dating. Quiet, modest student of law school and bright, successful queen, so different in temperament and character, but still very similar in many ways. They had so many common, interesting topics for conversation, so many joint activities that both liked. They really turned out to be like two halves of one whole. It was the girl who helped the guy to decide what he really wanted to do in life. "You are a born psychologist," she once said, "subtly feel people, interested in the feelings and thoughts of others. Try it, take a course. Maybe you'll get something." And Peter obeyed. After graduation, he got a job in a law office, did boring, routine work, received pennies, and at the same time studied online psychologist. Now that was something he really enjoyed and was actually passionate about. "I told you," Barbara smiled smugly. "I'm almost never wrong." The girl herself, meanwhile, was actively building her own business. She already owned an attire. Peter supported Barbara in everything, and she, accordingly, supported him. She developed the attire, and the guy tried himself as a psychologist, began to counsel people. They lived together in a rented apartment. They didn't talk about marriage, but this event in the future was implied as if by itself. And then, as if out of the blue, the girl's business trip abroad. She had an opportunity to study at a prestigious business school, but it meant a long separation. "It's such a chance, you have no idea." With eyes burning with admiration, she shared her impressions. The guy, of course, rejoiced for his beloved, but he was also anxious. After all, this is not a matter of 1 month, or even half a year. Barbara will have to spend about 2 years abroad. How would that affect their relationship? Somehow he thought that she would find someone there and would not want to go back at all, but he was wrong. The relationship really didn't stand the test of distance. But the fault in this was not Barbara. The first time after the departure of his beloved, he was not himself. He missed her so much. Peter missed her desperately from the moment he left her at the airport. He did everything on autopilot, working in his law office, counseling clients as a psychologist. They socialized, of course, almost every night. Barbara looked tired, but happy, enthusiastic. She liked everything: teachers, practical classes, even hours-long lectures. The girl shared her impressions with her boyfriend. As usual, he spoke encouraging words to her, supported her. As time went on, the video sessions became more and more infrequent. The course was intense. Sometimes she just didn't have the time or energy to talk to her boyfriend. He, of course, was getting himself worked up. It seemed to him that Barbara had someone else, for their conversations were too superficial, infrequent and short. Being a psychologist, he realized that it was because of his complexes. The mistrust and fear of losing her were all the result of insecurity. It seemed to retag that there were many young men around who were both prettier and more successful than him. Of course, Barbara compared and perhaps thought about starting a relationship with someone else, someone more worthy. When Barbara was around, he saw her eyes full of tenderness and acceptance, felt her warmth and sympathy. But now she is far away, and Retag began to think that Barbara does not love him at all, that she is worthy of more, that he does not reach her level. She is a successful beauty who has already established her own business. While she is studying abroad, the business is run by the manager, a classmate of the girl, the same friend who was attacked by dogs on the way to her house. And he is just an out-of-state lawyer with a paltry salary and an aspiring psychologist. It remains to be seen whether he will succeed in any of these fields. At this very moment, Julia appeared in his life, a girl who had recently broken up with a young man and now felt broken and depressed, so she turned to a psychologist. He counseled in online mode. His clients were from different cities, but it just so happened that Julia was his neighbor, who lived literally 2 blocks away. Peter realized this when he saw the view outside the window behind the beautiful girl on the screen. Huge, anxious eyes of an amazing violet hue, long brown hair, cute and very pleasant facial features. Julia was so touching, so soft and feminine. She was not at all like Barbara, who was confidently rushing toward her goal and was used to sweeping away all obstacles in her way. She was 4 years younger than Retag and still in her 3rd year of university. For about 6 years, that is, since high school, Julia had been dating a boy. Nothing foreshadowed trouble, and the girl was in full confidence that soon they would get married. Except that the young man suddenly told her that he was tired of their relationship, that he was stuffy, bored, just bored. The guy wanted to make up for lost time to meet with different girls, to go out with friends nights away. It turns out that he felt deprived of all this because he had been dating her since 9th grade. For the girl, it was a blow. She worried, looked for faults in herself that weren't there, and blamed herself. In the end, someone advised the girl to consult a psychologist. Counseling specialists cost not cheap. They were not affordable to the student, but Peter was a novice psychologist, so his rate quite satisfied the client. So they met. Peter realized that it was unprofessional, but could not help himself. A pretty girl somehow immediately captivated his heart. He felt more confident and stronger with her than with Barbara. She had long been the unspoken leader of their couple in all matters. Besides, she had no time for him now, and he was tired of feeling not even 2nd, but 5th or 6th place. Julia needed him so much, listened to him so attentively, and she really felt better talking to him. In general, it was not difficult at all to make the young beauty feel at ease. Soon they moved their meetings offline. Their conversations resembled not the communication of a psychologist and a client, but a friendly chat. Then friendship naturally grew into something more, and they both needed it to feel needed, loved, exceptional. Soon already the girl moved in with him. The man did not want to live a lie, so he honestly told Barbara about everything. Barbara's lips trembled, red spots appeared on her cheeks, but she quickly pulled herself together, as she always did. "Well," she said, shaking her head, "this is unexpected news. Well, if that's what you've decided, I won't make a scene. We're both adults and independent. Good luck with your new relationship." And Barbara disconnected. It was just like that: no hard feelings, no accusations, no attempts to find out the details. It only confirmed his opinion that Barbara had cooled off on him. Even after the breakup, he continued to think about her, even though he was happy with Julia. She seemed soft, malleable, pliable, like warm wax. She had grown up in a small provincial town. Her family still lived there, so she had a somewhat patriarchal mores, a traditional upbringing, and that was its own charm. Although as a psychologist, the guy realized that many of her attitudes needed to be worked out. She studied economics and lived in a dormitory before she moved in with the guy. Her parents were not rich, so she could only rely on herself. And she tried to study hard, because she wanted to get an education. Before she met the psychologist, her studies had been her first priority. But she fell in love, lost her head, and therefore put everything on the back burner: her friends, lectures, exams, part-time work. The guy, of course, very flattered. In turn, he tried to do something for her, worked more to buy her gifts, take the girl to restaurants and cafes, took on some of the household duties, which pleasantly surprised not used to such behavior of men young lady. He bathed in love and admiration, enjoyed care and warmth. He had never felt so loved the girl actually put him on a pedestal. Sometimes he had jealous thoughts. I wonder if she behaved the same way with her ex. Somehow it seemed that yes, caring and helpfulness were inherent traits of this girl's personality. And yet, he thought of Barbara. Such an interesting communication on equal terms with his new love did not work out. The girl often did not understand his jokes and almost never knew the authors or those movies about which Peter told her, and the man at such moments caught himself thinking he still lacked Barbara, her wit, insight, directness. And then Julia announced that she was expecting a child. This was unexpected and untimely news. She was still a student, and he did not earn enough to support his family. He is just developing. He plans to study, gain new experience and knowledge. But if there is a baby, the development can be put on the cross, because training does not imply large earnings, and the family needs to feed. Peter very cautiously suggested that she abort the pregnancy. It seemed to him that this was the best solution to all problems. The girl took offense at him for the first yelled at him, which she had never done before, and then cried. It was hard for him to look at her in such a state. He felt so sorry for the young girl, who of course was also shocked by the news of the pregnancy. "Well, you hear," Peter put his arm around her shoulders. "Everything will be fine. We'll be fine. You're not going to leave me. You're not going to leave us now, are you?" "No." Peter held the girl even tighter to him. It's a good thing she couldn't see the look on his face. Confused, upset. He didn't want this baby. He didn't want it at all. No. He saw himself as a father in the future, maybe even a father of many children. But it was too soon to start a family. He lived in a rented apartment, worked at a low-paying job he didn't like, and he was just starting out as a psychologist. Yes, she was beautiful, tender, caring, but the guy did not think about tying his life with her. It was a pleasant, not burdensome relationship, needed by both of them at the moment they met. The guy felt like he was trapped. Decency and responsibility kept him from leaving his own child behind. The girl came to her senses a little, and even began to rejoice in the pregnancy. The psychologist gained additional clients. Now he worked from dawn to dawn. It was necessary to prepare a safety cushion for the birth of the baby. The young people decided to get married without a lavish celebration, although the bride still dreamed of a beautiful white dress and a wedding with guests and contests. She shared this with a slight sadness in her voice. But the girl understood perfectly well they would need the money for the child. There was no need for unnecessary spending in their situation. Peter felt inadequate again. Here, he can't even fulfill his future wife's wish. She's a young girl. Of course she wants to feel like a princess at her own wedding. She got involved with a beggar, so she has to make herself comfortable and endure hardships from the very beginning. Julia was very afraid to tell her parents that she was pregnant. "You know, my parents were so happy that I got in. I am the first in the family with higher education. They had such high hopes for me. And now I have to drop out. Why? Can I take a leave of absence during childbirth and then you can finish your studies?" "No, I have a family now. I know what it's like. It takes up all your time, all your energy. School's gonna have to wait. And that's why I'm afraid to tell my parents. But you have to tell them, and it's best not to wait." She decided to go home on New Year's Eve. The guy offered to accompany her to support her in a difficult situation. And with the parents of the bride, probably still need to get acquainted. The man was sure he will find the right words to calm the overbearing father and her mother. Not without reason he works as a psychologist. But the girl had other plans. "No, I'd rather go there myself the first time. You don't know my dad. He can say unpleasant things to you in the heat of the moment." Peter was relieved that it was up to him to offer. She said no. Well, she knows what's right. Let her really talk to her own people, prepare the ground. Julia left and disappeared. She didn't answer her phone. Must have been a bad connection in her small hometown. Julia only managed to call from the train station to say she'd arrived, and that was it. Peter wasn't worried. Why would he be? Julia had come home to her family after all. Maybe parents will not be delighted that the daughter's student will soon give them grandchildren, but they will not kill her, grumble, and accept the situation. Especially since the baby's father isn't giving up on the baby and they have a wedding coming up. Peter was enjoying the solitude. Turns out he was a little tired of the girl. At some time in his life, she became a salvation for him, pulled him out of the abyss of anxious thoughts, surrounded him with warmth, inspired him. But now her care and helpfulness irritated him, as did her obsessive attention almost constantly, and much more. When the girl did not arrive on the agreed day, he still worried. The girl began lectures, preparation for the session. She could not miss all this without a good reason. The girl's phone was still stubbornly silent, and then the guy went to the university, where Julia studied. Found her group, talked to a few people. They were not aware of what had happened. When Peter had given up hope, a girl caught up with him in the hallway. "Are you looking for Julia?" "Yes, you are, Peter, aren't you?" He nodded slowly. "I'm Jane, her girlfriend. We're from the same town. She asked me to look you up, and here you are. That's lucky." "What about her? Why didn't she come back, do you know?" "Oh, it's a story. It's a nightmare. Her parents, they're very strict. She's their pride, the smartest, most promising kid in the family. They were so happy that their daughter got in, bragged to everyone in town, thought she'd become a successful economist, and then you and all the plans fell apart. When the father found out about his daughter's plans, he was furious. Pregnant out of wedlock, soon to be married. She was going to drop out of school too. She was going to become a good wife, an ideal mother, a housewife, instead of conquering career heights. In general, a strict parent decided no wedding and similar tricks, personally escorted his daughter to the clinic, where the head doctor was his former classmate. Even before New Year's Eve, the girl had an operation solved, according to her parents, all the problems so that the child is no more. Peter exclaimed when he heard that. He saw with what joy the girl was waiting for the baby and could imagine in what condition she was now. And anyway, what kind of wildness is this? The girl is of age, she has the right to decide for herself. And what about him? His opinion was not asked at all. "That's the way it is with us," Jane shrugged. "We're used to listening to our parents. There's no other way. And she didn't go against her mother's and father's wishes either. She told you not to look for her and not to try to find out for yourself. Julia will now study by correspondence from home under parental supervision so that nothing like this happens again. That's all she asked me to tell you." "Well, almost." Jane hesitated, clearly uncomfortable being the messenger of bad news. "She also said that your relationship was a mistake, but she also wished you happiness in your personal life." "Thank you, her too." Peter shook his head and walked towards the university exit. Later at home, he thought over the whole situation and came to the conclusion that everything had happened for the best. The guy didn't feel bitter about the loss. He did not even feel upset. On the contrary, there was joy because everything was solved by itself, without his participation. There will be no family and child, and it's not his fault. Julia, of course it's a shame. Such overbearing parents not to be envied. On the other hand, it's her choice. She could have gone against her father if she wanted to, because she knew that her beloved would accept her, would not give her an offense, and yet she gave up the child and the man she loved. That's all right. Life went its way. Suddenly, the activity as a psychologist began to bear fruit, and very even generous. Soon Peter left the hated work in the office and gave himself completely to psychology. In relationships, he was now more cautious. Romances did happen, but the man did not allow any mental intimacy, and even less the appearance of thoughts of children, family, and so on. He did not want it all yet. Or maybe the women were not the right ones. All of them the man involuntarily compared with Barbara, and each time the comparison was not in favor of another companion. They didn't measure up to the queen, not at all. Peter seemed to feel quite happy and accomplished. Favorite high-paying job, his own apartment, a beautiful car. And yet, something was missing. And then fate again brought him together with the one he had not stopped thinking about all this time. By that time, Peter was already quite a successful and established man. He consulted people online from all over the country. There was even a waiting list for his sessions. Retag's services were already expensive. The man periodically published books that sold out like hotcakes. The edition he illustrated himself. Thus, another of his talents, artistic, was realized. To the profession of psychologist added a part-time job, digital artist. He had to take a couple of courses to hone his skills, and now he was quite in demand as an illustrator as well. He lived in his own beautiful and stylish apartment, drove an expensive car, had savings and, in general, was rightly considered quite a well-off man in his 30s. Many people of his age had never dreamed of such a thing. Peter, going to the bar that night, had not expected this meeting at all. He generally thought that Barbara had been living somewhere in Moscow for a long time. She disappeared from social networks, so he could not follow her fate as before, but he thought that with her ambitions in a small town there was nothing to do. This city was too small for a queen. However, she was sitting at the bar with her foot on the leg. She was grown up, one if even prettier, well-groomed, stylishly and expensively, but at the same time not flashy, impeccable taste. The same regal posture, the same fathomless, penetrating eyes, seeming completely black in the semi-darkness of the bar, and the hair, shiny black hair flowing down her back. She usually wore her hair shorter. It was the first time the man had seen her like this, and it suited her very well. The girl was here with her friends. They were sitting at the counter, as there were no free tables, discussing something lively, laughing. Peter felt numb. At first he even wanted to leave the bar, to run away, because if they met, they would have to talk about something, and the guy still felt guilty that he was the reason for their breakup. His infidelity was to blame, to be honest. And there was resentment too. Barbara hadn't even tried to find out then, so she was already completely indifferent to him. Maybe she had even met someone there, in a distant country. But he soon realized that he was not afraid of meeting Barbara. On the contrary, he was attracted to her, drawn to her like a magnet, just like when he was young. The man couldn't take his eyes off her. Each of her movements, each feature of her appearance, everything caused complete acceptance. Everything was almost native, his own. She seemed to feel his gaze, turned around. Their eyes met, and Barbara smiled at him without a shadow of resentment, without a shadow of contempt. Peter rose from his seat and moved toward her. They talked all night until morning, retiring to the far end of the bar, where the music was quieter, to enjoy each other's company. And they talked and talked and talked. Barbara talked about her life abroad. It wasn't easy for her, studying from morning till night, not having a settled life. What admirers? She didn't even think of having an affair. Simply no strength or time for it, was not purely physically. So the speculation about other men turned out to be false. When you told me we were breaking up, it threw me off my game for a long time. I even thought about dropping out of school, but then of course I pulled myself together. Peter looked into the woman's eyes and understood, felt how hard and sad it was for her then. The guilt was overwhelming him more and more. Well, I got what I deserved for my deed, he sighed. Not for nothing they say about the boomerang of fate. And the man told about his situation with Julia. He didn't forget to mention that all these years he had only thought about her, and regretted, desperately regretted their breakup, which was initiated by himself. I felt I was not up to you. I thought you needed someone stronger and more successful. And now? What do you think now? Are you worthy of me now? That question made the man hot. He knew Barbara was asking for a reason. Really? Was there even a 1 in a million chance that something would happen between them? Maybe. Right now I'm perfectly capable of handling a gorgeous woman like you, he said jokingly, but his eyes were serious. Barbara smiled and kissed him herself. That's how they ended up together again. Both of them had already reached certain career heights. Peter was a sought-after psychologist and Barbara ran a chain of attires. They decided to buy a house and chose a cottage in a well-appointed village near the city. It seemed to both of them that it was a better place to raise their children. They already felt quite ready for parenthood. The age is quite solid, the material base is created. What's the use of procrastinating? They started planning for heirs at the stage of preparation for the wedding. Both went through doctors. The man turned out to be absolutely healthy, and she had problems. "It's a pity we didn't have time to become mothers earlier." The doctor shook his head. 5 or 6 years ago, everything would have been much easier. But your problems have progressed over the years, and now there is little chance. Barbara was upset, of course, but as always, she quickly pulled herself together. She was used to challenges, used to fighting, and she thought she would win this time too. That was the way it had always been. The man supported his beloved in everything, accompanied her to medical procedures, together with her looking for information about her disease and sought advice from the best doctors. Years went by, and the desired pregnancy never came. Iron unbending lady sometimes cried from powerlessness. She really wanted a child, Peter too. He was ready to give up heirs, only if his wife was happy. Ritega was frightened by this, became uncomfortable with his wife's confusion. In a man's world, this could not be. She is strong. She never cries. She always knows what to do. He tried his best to calm his wife. When the doctors gave an unequivocal verdict, pregnancy is basically impossible. Unless a miracle happens, they had a serious conversation. This has to stop. Stop torturing yourself. All these attempts, they are bad for your health and morale. Stop torturing yourself. Many people live without children and in their own pleasure. That's normal too. Don't you want a child, your own son or daughter? I want, of course, like any other person, to continue the species. It's an innate instinct, you know, but not at such a cost. Even more, I want to live happily, and I want you, my wife, to be happy too. That's my dream. Perhaps it's time for us to accept the situation, to free ourselves from unfulfilled hopes and live in peace. We can do it. I definitely want a baby. You're a man. You probably wouldn't understand. But if this is the way things are, what can we do? You just have to accept it. I'll help you. I've got the right techniques, so. No, the woman said firmly. There are other ways to become parents. I've been looking at orphanage websites lately. You can't imagine how many of them there are now, orphans. Some of them left in the maternity hospital. Some of them later deprived of their parents. There's one boy, No, the man responded immediately, that's right. There are no orphans. The man understood perfectly well what his wife was getting at, a foster child from who knows where. Ritag had a prejudice against adoption. His neighbors, Sergio and Mary, are good people, kind and smiling. They were always attentive to the local children and gave them candy, and let them play with their dog, and even took a sincere interest in the affairs of the neighbor children. It was especially pleasant, by the way. But they had no children of their own. Other neighbors often sighed about it, but God didn't give them any. Too bad. And then they had a baby after all, a chubby-cheeked baby boy. Peter was surprised. He already understood then that at first children are very small. They can neither walk nor talk. They are carried in a stroller. But here it was just like that. Mary herself explained to the local kids that Paul was a boy from the orphanage. That's how it happens when kids are left without parents, and some are lucky enough to be taken into a family. Peter was very happy for Paul. He was very lucky indeed. Sergio and Mary are the best parents. You can only dream of such parents. The boys took Paul under their patronage. The girls socialized with him. The boys took him to their games. And at first everyone seemed to like Paul. And then the kid began to grow up and began to manifest in him qualities that at first simply caused rejection, and then grew into something terrible, ugly, unimaginable. Simply put, he became a monster. In first grade, the boy started smoking. That's when he was first caught stealing. Paul did not want to sit quietly at lessons, beat and called children names, walked around the classroom instead of sitting at the desk. The teacher could not do anything with him. Paul swore, although his parents were intelligent people. His foster mother and father did not think he was worth anything. Peter still remembered how his parents ran around the yard at night in search of their misbehaving son. The neighborhood boys helped them. And then there's more. Paul got mixed up with a bad crowd. He skipped school, he smoked. He even started drinking when he was only a 5th grader. Adults often discussed the situation and all agreed that it was his genes. The unfortunate neighbors were presented in neighborhood conversations as innocent martyrs who had shouldered such a burden for nothing. They were really good parents. They loved the boy, practiced a lot with him. Even then, Peter realized that blood is not water, and that even the most correct upbringing cannot always correct the code, which was written by nature for generations. Paul soon ended up in a juvenile prison because he maimed someone in a street fight. After that, the neighbors bought a tiny and old house somewhere on the outskirts of town and moved away. So Peter didn't know what happened to their family next. But he assumed that nothing good could be there anymore. No, he didn't agree to such a thing categorically. His wife did not fully accept his choice. His wife periodically tried to change his mind, gave seemingly reasonable arguments, told about positive examples, but he was adamant. He did not want them to turn from happy, beautiful and healthy people into the likeness of Sergio and Mary, became the same thin, pale and restrained. Well, no. The wife seemed to settle down over time. She found her purpose in other things. The woman now traveled to orphanages and helped the unfortunate, destitute children. It was charity. In one orphanage, she set up a playroom and in another a yard with swings and slides. Barbara found out what problems there were in this or that institution and solved them. Somewhere there were not enough nannies, somewhere the roof was leaking, somewhere the pupils were wearing old, no longer fashionable clothes. Barbara not only covered the primary needs of orphanages, but also did something more. She founded circles and sections right in the orphanages so that orphans could find themselves, show their talents, organized fancy holidays for children, and found like-minded people. The woman felt almost happy. She had no children of her own, but she gave joy and warmth to thousands of destitute children. Even the newspapers wrote about her activities, filmed videos. The man was happy for his wife. Finally, she found herself, realized her maternal instinct in such an interesting way. It was good for everyone. The man himself sometimes took part in the actions. He called his wife nothing but a good fairy. Barbara laughed and said that she liked the former title of queen better. Peter thought that his life was now predetermined for many years to come, but fate again threw him a test, which he again failed miserably. One of his assistants, who served as his secretary, was a young, dazzlingly beautiful woman who looked like a photo model from a glossy magazine. Peter himself didn't realize how it happened. He and his team were celebrating another successful project in a restaurant. His wife was not present. She had just left for another city on business. Sarah asked the chief to dance. Peter saw her huge mermaid eyes for the first time. Peter couldn't resist. How is it even possible to be sympathized with such a beautiful woman? They went to Saraline's rented apartment and spent the night there. In the morning, he did not regret anything, strangely enough. On the contrary, he felt happy next to a beautiful woman. Anyway, they became lovers. Sarah was just perfect, beautiful, not demanding, passionate. She realized that their relationship is a secret and did not seem to claim anything at first, and then began to talk about love, the development of their affair, and even about divorce. Peter didn't understand himself. He was physically attracted to Sarah. He was crazy about her green eyes and slightly husky voice, her smell, her blonde hair. But Barbara was her own person in spirit. The man, being a psychologist, couldn't make sense of himself. Was it really possible? He fell in love with two women at once. All in all, difficult times had come for Retag. Now he felt guilty in front of both of them as lawful wedded wife and his wife. A decision had to be made. But how to do it, so that he would not regret it? And then Sagalapina pulled a trump card out of her sleeve. Just think, I'll give you a child our own. Barbara won't be able to do that. But me. Peter thought about it. Indeed, with Sagalinina they could have a strong, full-fledged family. But it would be hard to leave Barbara too. She is already dear, own, faithful, reliable. To betray her again. And yet the decision is ripe. He chose the secretary. At the same time, with Barbara planned to remain in friendly relations. But the man did not dare to voice his decision to his wife. The mistress pressed, hurried. She could be understood. She wanted certainty. But he was still slow. And again, for the umpteenth time, fate intervened. Something happened that he never expected. One day his wife said they needed to have a serious talk. The conversation took place in the evening in the living room of a house too spacious for a family of two. Peter was nervous. It seemed to him that Barbara had found out everything about him and was about to ask him uncomfortable questions. On the one hand, that would be even better. At least things would finally be resolved. On the other hand, I wanted to present the situation in a different way. I have some bad news for you, his wife began. Peter tensed up. Here it comes. Only further wife told such a story that worries about the disclosure of the affair seemed to be nonsense. I am ill and very seriously. I've been diagnosed with an incurable blood disease. I only found out recently. It took a long time to get a diagnosis. Why? Why didn't I tell you before? She grinned. I just didn't want to worry you before. I thought it was just a vitamin deficiency or something. And then I got this terrible diagnosis. Is there really no cure? It's the 21st century. He didn't want to believe what his wife was saying. It seemed that anything could be cured nowadays, if only there was money. And luckily they had the money. Barbara shook her head sadly. She put her hands on the man's shoulders. She's comforting him, too, in this state. It's amazing. I don't believe you can't be helped. We're going to fight. Peter was going to leave his wife, but he didn't want to lose her like this, for good, permanently. Barbara meant a lot to him. She was his own person, dear and beloved. He wouldn't give her up to some disease, no way. Do you remember years ago when you said we had to accept the fact that we weren't going to have children? Accept the situation. That's what I'm saying now. We just have to accept it. He shook his head. No, it wasn't the same. And again, the tests, the clinics, the consultations with medical luminaries from all over the world. Only now the fight was not for the dream of parenthood, but for life. The man was not going to give up. He studied a lot of information about his wife's disease, now better understood the situation. Yes, the disease really turned out to be very insidious and dangerous. Most patients after diagnosis died within a year. But there were exceptions, cases of miraculous healing, and Peter hoped for that. Of course, he didn't say anything about the mistress. It was not enough to kill a man in such a state with bad news. Sarah agreed with Retag's decision. She said she was willing to wait until the situation was resolved one way or another. She even supported him, saw how hard it was for him, understood perfectly well that his wife meant a lot to him, but she was not jealous. A perfect life companion. Barbara was getting worse and worse, despite intensive treatment, and she was slowly fading away. Her husband was caring for her on his own. It was clear that these were her last days. It was hard to realize that the fight was lost. The man was still unable to come to terms with it, but the patient seemed to accept the situation and even calmed down. The woman quite consciously enjoyed every day, realizing that there was not much left. She met with friends, visited beautiful and favorite places while she had strength. The man tried to accompany his wife everywhere, but he had a job and the secretary needed some attention. However, Barbara sometimes asked him to leave her alone. They talked a lot during this period. I am grateful to fate that I have such a man as you in my life, the woman smiled. You always understood me like no one else, felt my soul. It is worth a lot. The man smiled, squeezed his wife's hand, and felt guilty again. It's good that she doesn't know about Caroline after all. What a blessing that he didn't have time to reveal his cards in front of his wife. All that's needed is a negative experience at such a difficult time. I think about it sometimes too. What a blessing that we finally met. He answered quite sincerely, "You are a unique person, the closest to me." And these words, too, paradoxically, were pure truth. He understood perfectly well that he was losing a dear person, a close friend, and a warmer and deeper relationship in his life will not be. She left at dawn in her sleep. Quietly and calmly. An easy end, as many people said afterwards. A nurse slept in the room with her. Her frightened scream was what woke Retag, and he immediately understood everything. The ambulance, the police, filling out some paperwork, preparing to say goodbye. Everything was happening in a fog. He couldn't accept the fact that Barbara was gone. Not at all, not anywhere. Where could it all suddenly disappear to? Her sharp mind, her love of children, her determination, her courage. How could this be possible? Retega stood by her in this difficult moment. She honestly tried to reassure the man, but she had never felt him as subtly as Barbara. She said things that hurt the man even more. It's all for the best. At least she didn't have any pain now. In fact, the situation resolved itself. You didn't even have to say anything. Peter shook his head. How can losing someone like that be for the best? She just doesn't understand anything. There were even such words, think about it. You will get everything now, you had no children, so you are the only heir. And in a divorce, everything would have to be divided in half. The man looked at her in such a way that she immediately realized what a terrible foolishness she had said. The girl tried to remedy the situation. Well, I mean, she got sick anyway. It would have happened anyway. "And here's such a benefit. Just shut up," the widower asked. People came to say goodbye, lots of people, colleagues and friends, and also those whom she had helped for many years. They came up to the man, expressed their condolences, said good words about his wife, and Peter was proud of her. He was proud of his wonderful wife. He was desperately sorry that he too rarely told her how wonderful she was, and yet he was glad that sometimes he did. A few days had passed since Barbara had left when he received a phone call from a woman who introduced herself as a notary and made an appointment to read the will. Peter was surprised. He didn't know that his wife had made a will. Probably she decided to make it easier for him to receive the inheritance. She had taken care of everything. And now Peter sat in the kitchen and smoked out the window. It was early morning. Sarah was still asleep, and he was suffering from insomnia, unfortunately. He wanted to go to sleep and see Barbara, maybe even talk to her. The man sighed and put the kettle on. He should drink coffee, strong, hot, black. Maybe it would cheer him up a little, because his head was so heavy. Peter poured the steaming coffee into a cup, sat down at the table again, and thought. He remembered Barbara. Their life, her dreams and plans and desires. Yeah, the world had lost a lot of things. She had done so much good for people, for underprivileged children. Barbara was even seriously afraid to hear from the notary that the woman had bequeathed all her money to some orphanage or children's home. He was distracted from his thoughts by his mistress. She flew into the kitchen, anxious, disheveled, but still unrealistically beautiful. "We're late," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "I overslept, and you don't know why you're sitting here." Peter, as if out of a daze, took a sip of long, cooled coffee and began to pack. They still managed to get there in time, and arrived at the office when the meeting with the notary was still 5 minutes away. It was lucky, no traffic, no accidents on the way. His companion looked luxurious, even too luxurious for such an occasion. Tight, dark gray dress emphasized the graceful curves of her figure. Light blonde hair flowed beautifully over her fragile shoulders. But now Retag was not interested in admiring his companion. He wanted to go back about 5 years, when these two important women were not around. The girl turned around on the porch and, trying to hide her irritation, turned to him. He grinned. He understood his mistress was eager to know what he had inherited from Barbara. As they entered the notary's office, an old woman, dressed very modestly, even poorly, hurried in. What to say, she looked like a beggar. And a girl, a lovely, charming girl, about 10 years old. Wavy, blonde hair, big gray eyes. Peter looked at her and couldn't understand. This child reminded him of someone. Just who? Could it be a relative of the deceased? Maybe he had met this little girl once before. Just in case, the man politely and kindly said hello to both the grandmother and her granddaughter. The old woman answered cautiously, somehow wary or averse. But the girl smiled broadly, which made his soul immediately lighten. She looked at the old woman and the girl as if they were nasty spiders in a jar. She obviously hadn't expected to see them here. "Have a seat," smiled the notary, dressed in an elegant pantsuit. Everyone present followed her advice. "I thought only the deceased's loved ones would be here." She raised her thin eyebrows and said, "Those who appear in the will." "That's right," the notary nodded. Segalinina's eyebrows rose even higher in surprise or indignation, and she gave the old woman and the girl another scornful glance. "Are we expecting someone else?" Sahalinina asked, putting her foot on her leg. "No, everyone is here now." The notary behaved professionally and did not react to the negativity of the capricious visitor. She stood up, expressed her condolences, said a few warm words about Barbara, and then took out of a large envelope a double-folded sheet of paper, both sides written in neat handwriting. "This letter is for you." The notary handed the sheet to the man. "You can read it here. Here the deceased explains everything to you." He clutched the letter with both hands. He couldn't wait to be alone to read the last message of his beloved. There was no doubt in his mind that something very important was written there. After that, the notary began to read out the will aloud, as was customary. As expected, a considerable amount of money was given to the foundation, which was engaged in the support of orphans. The mistress wrinkled her nose when she heard the size of the transfer. But the husband got all the real estate, cars, and even business. The man, however, had no idea what he should do with a network of attires. He never really got into his wife's business, but it seemed that this business was already quite a well-oiled mechanism. It worked like clockwork by itself. Barbara had managed to set up the firm in such a way that everything functioned without her direct participation and control. And then the notary said something that made Salinina jump. The deceased had bequeathed a large sum of money to a girl named Eva, the same girl who was sitting across from her grandmother. Eva didn't even pay attention to the amount. She was too young to realize how much money it was. But the old woman realized everything. She shuddered, turned pale, then even blushed. An obliging female notary immediately offered the agitated visitor a glass of water. Who are these people? Indignant. We don't know them. Are they her relatives? They're obviously not first cousins. Otherwise, the deceased's husband would have known them. What's going on? Is this all done by law? Legally, confirmed the notary. It's the will of the deceased. A person can name whoever they want in the will. It doesn't have to be relatives. Who are you? I've already addressed the old lady directly. Scammers? Don't get your hopes up, you'll get nothing. I'll prove that she was incapacitated when she signed the will. She's a sick person. And you must have taken advantage of her condition? She looked at her. Not with fright, no, more with disappointment. The man noticed that at the beginning of the meeting the girl had admired her. Of course, such a beauty, just a photo model. But now the idol was turning into a monster before his eyes. Calm down. Irritatedly threw over his shoulder the man. He himself was not surprised by this outcome. The man realized that his spouse would definitely let some of what she had accumulated during her life go to charity. The girl and the grandmother are obviously very poor. Surely his wife wanted to help them. But why them? And with such a large sum of money. Excuse me, I'm not protesting in any way, he said to the old woman. If my wife has decided so, then it's right. But I'm just curious. How did you meet Barbara? Why did she choose you? The old woman looked him carefully in the eyes. Read the letter and you'll understand. EVA, we have to go. The girl slipped off the chair with relief. What was happening was clearly beginning to strain her. Let's read the letter, she demanded as the door slammed shut behind her. At least we'll know who they are. You see, I must read it in private. She raised her lips resentfully, but remained silent. Peter sat in an old coffee shop he'd frequented as a student. He had chosen the farthest table against the wall behind the racks and plants. It was quiet, peaceful, cozy, and lonely. There was no better place to finally read a letter. It was not so easy to get rid of the mistress. She wanted to be with him when he began to read the letter. He even had to raise his voice at her. And now here he was, alone with the letter. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to jump out of her chest. I wonder what his beloved wanted to tell him. Well, hello, Peter. If you're reading this letter, it means, unfortunately, I'm gone. It's a shame, of course. Life is a good thing. Anyway, it's all happened now. So it's time for you to find out about everything. I love you. You know you love me too. I'm sure of that, despite your occasional flings. By the way, I know about Sarah. I wish I could have seen her face when she heard how much money I bequeathed to Evie. It must have been fun. He shuddered. So she knew everything. What a nightmare. And he had made such an effort not to upset his wife. All the energy that should have gone into fighting the disease. Don't think I don't take offense because of Sarah. I understand everything. You're the kind of person who can't live his whole life with one woman. A creative person who needs inspiration. Amused. Peter thought, wow. His wife understood him better than he understood himself. She is just such a muse. But I never doubted that you loved me, really. You were there for me during a difficult time in my life. Supportive, caring, that's priceless. I wasn't so scared with you. You fought so fiercely for me when I already realized that that was it, when I had resigned myself to it. But you didn't give up until the end. You have no idea what it all meant to me. Thank you for that. And know that you are my nearest and dearest person. The man felt tears come to his eyes. The sharp pain of losing Barbara pierced his heart again. Yes, he felt the same way. She had been a close and kindred spirit to him. They were more than just husband and wife soul mates, kindred spirits. He was willing to move mountains for her, and she would do the same for him. Now let's talk about EVA. Wonderful girl, isn't she? You've probably seen her already. She's so sweet. Doesn't she remind you of anyone? She's like someone who's not a stranger to both of us. I met her a long time ago. 3 years ago. She was just a little girl then. You know, I was helping orphanages. She's an orphan too. But at least she has a great-grandmother. But she and her grandmother live very poorly. And at that time the situation became so difficult that the old lady had to give her granddaughter to an orphanage. It was hard for both of them, but in the orphanage the girl was fed and clothed, but great-grandmother could not always do it. I saw her at a New Year's Eve performance. The children had prepared a big concert. The girl's great-grandmother was in the hall. She, by the way, cried without ceasing, blotting her eyes with a handkerchief. A sad sight. The girl attracted my attention first by her appearance. The little beauty reminded me of someone, only I did not immediately realize who. Have you finally figured it out, or not yet? I asked the teachers about the fate of the little girl and was horrified. 7-year-old girl had to go through something that not every adult can withstand. At first, she had everything to be happy. She lived in a small town with her mother, grandmother, and grandfather. True, there was no daddy in the family, but this is not uncommon today. It's true that many children grow up without fathers. There is nothing surprising in this. Eva was everyone's favorite. The young mother was very fond of her. It was said that she gave birth to a girl from a very favorite man, and he abandoned them, did not want to become a father afraid. It's good that mom had good parents. Of course, they did not abandon their daughter in a difficult situation and accepted, supported, and when she gave birth, very helpful to the young mother with a baby girl. They lived like that, and the 4 of them grandmother was engaged in the household, grandfather earned money to feed the family, and the mother finished her university studies by correspondence, because now she had a baby in her arms. The girl grew up a healthy and obedient child. About such people say gift children. Her mother simply adored her. Grandmother and grandfather in her soul did not dote. There was no extra money in the family, but adults spoiled her as much as possible. Her mother had a dream to go to the sea with her daughter, to show the little girl the high waves, walk with her along the coast, breathe fresh sea air. When the girl grew up a little, the grandfather decided to fulfill the wish of his daughter and granddaughter. He bought up some money and planned a trip to the sea in the family car. It was cheaper that way. She was only 4 years old at the time. At first, everything was going just fine. The family had a wonderful vacation at the seaside. All their dreams came true: walks along the shore, a southern tan, and beautiful bright pictures. But on the way back, on the way home on the highway, there was a terrible accident. The car lost control and went into a ditch. Later, the cause was determined. It turned out that grandfather had a heart attack right behind the wheel. A long trip, heat, plenty of impressions, a sudden change of climate. A lot of factors came together. That's the result. The driver himself was almost unhurt, but he was not taken to the hospital. The cause of death was that very heart attack. His wife died on the spot from her injuries. His daughter, Eva's mother, she was taken to the hospital, but the condition of the young woman was very serious. She was placed in intensive care. And what happened to the youngest passenger? It's a miracle she survived. Just a couple of abrasions, a fright, but not a minor fright. The girl cried out at night for a long time, and often dreamed about this terrible accident. The little girl was taken to her only close relative, great-grandmother. She lost her son-in-law and daughter in the accident. The little girl's mother was in a serious condition, but there was still hope for her salvation. Loan for treatment required money, and a lot of it. So the old lady had to sell the apartment where the happy family lived. The treatment didn't work. The mother was not saved. The girl was left an orphan. She had no one but an old great-grandmother. No, there was a father somewhere, but how to find him? The old woman did not know the details of her granddaughter's history. She had no idea where her father might be. And does he need a daughter if he has already abandoned her? There was nothing to do. Great-grandmother began to raise her little granddaughter alone. It was hard. It's not easy to keep up with a small child at such a respectable age. Great-grandmother's pension was miserable. Her health was also poor. She couldn't get a part-time job. There was also an allowance to formalize and confirm. It had to be every year, and it cost the old woman a lot of work. So many papers to collect, so many offices to run through. But the old woman tried, ran, collected so that her great-granddaughter had at least this minimum allowance. And somehow the old woman and the girl lived poorly, saving money on everything, already suffering, but they kept afloat. And then it was time to go to school. The family budget couldn't bear the new expenses. My great-grandmother did her best to get her great-granddaughter to school, even going into debt. And after that, there were very bad times when even bread was not enough every day. So great-grandmother made the decision and put the girl in an orphanage, temporarily due to the difficult financial situation. And then that concert, the stage, I saw her. I was hooked by her looks, and it spun. She looks a lot like you. Did you notice that? Same eyes, same look, same spread. Check it out, and the mole on her cheek. Even the mole is exactly the same. I looked at the girl and realized that coincidences like that just don't happen. And then it turned out that it really wasn't a coincidence. Peter tore himself away from the letter. How had he not guessed it at once? Evie really looked like him. It was not without reason that the girl seemed familiar to him. He saw almost the same features in the mirror every day. I dug deeper. I even had to hire detectives. And I found out. Anyway, just don't fall off your chair, or whatever you're sitting on right now. That's your daughter. I purposely withheld her mother's name before, or you'd have guessed right away. And I like to keep things intriguing. You know, it's more interesting that way. That's what my great-grandmother told me, that you left Julia pregnant. Scared, didn't want to be a father, didn't want to take responsibility. I immediately thought there was something wrong. So of course I dug deeper again. I found out that you wanted to get married, but the wedding didn't happen. Why? I tracked down her best friend. She told me. The girl's father was against the wedding. He did send his daughter to the hospital, but it turned out she couldn't do anything. All the deadlines had passed. She seemed to love you very much and begged her parents to let her become your wife, especially since you had already filed an application, but her father was adamant. He thought that, being a wife and mother, his daughter will certainly not finish university, and decided so the daughter gives birth, lives with her parents, they help with the baby, and she finishes her studies, builds a career, and then does what she wants. But the accident happened soon after she got her diploma. Who knows, maybe if she'd stayed alive, she would have found you sooner. She probably would have. Well, Eva's great-grandmother was simply unaware of who the girl's father was, so she couldn't find you if she wanted to. That's the story. If it hadn't been for chance, the girl would still be fatherless. Now I hope you understand why I left her such a large inheritance. She's your daughter. I had to help that girl. It wasn't just money, I hope. I think I gave something much more valuable, finding a father for the girl. I know how you long for a child, a baby of your own. And here you have a ready-made daughter, all grown up. Interesting with her own opinions and personality. She's wonderful, and she needs you very, very much. And you need her. Just do me a favor, don't make Caroline the girl's stepmother. She'll make her life a nightmare. Find someone else who's more empathetic and understanding. You deserve better than that. And so does EVA. I believe that you are the closest people. You will reunite and live happily ever after. I wish I could be there for you. I love you and kiss you. Take care of each other. Peter, who had finished reading, only then noticed that his hands were trembling. As a postscript, the wife had left the address of the girl and a link to a DNA test, which, as it turned out, this amazing woman had managed to conduct secretly from her husband. Peter did not doubt the result of this research. A light, fresh breeze was blowing from the sea. It was too cold for swimming, but walking along the shore in such weather was a pleasure. A man walked along the sand holding his daughter's hand. It was hard to get used to it, but how pleasant it was to say to someone, "This is my daughter." They talked a lot, traveled a lot, talked about everything in the world. Peter felt absolutely happy, and he knew very well who he had to thank for this happiness: Barbara. Amazing, unique, intelligent, sensitive, kind. Sometimes it seemed to re-tag that she was somewhere nearby, looking at him and his daughter and smiling contentedly. Marian Morris had long since stopped being dreamy. She had a lot to worry about in this life. Not long ago, her father had left the family, leaving his wife with an invalid mother and 3 minor children alone. The 19-year-old girl was the main helper in this family. Sometimes it even seemed that she had become a substitute for her father. The mother had a quiet, calm character, but she was never affectionate and attentive to her relatives. Especially her indifference lately extended to the elder Marion, whom she more often called Mary, and treated her as if she were a neighbor's girl. Mrs. Kimberly, a mother of many children, had another son aged 11 called Jack and a very young daughter, a preschooler named Cassandra. There were rumors in the neighborhood that Marion was not with Marcus, Kimberly's ex-husband, but with some long-time pal of the woman. Most likely a drinking buddy, she liked to get down to the bottle, just like her husband. But then one day, Marcus had an irreparable event. He suddenly had an epiphany, became more and more interested in newfangled trends for a healthy lifestyle, and attempted various diets. First, Marcus gave up his family's favorite sausage sandwiches in the morning, then all meat dishes. Kimberly began to buy more fish, which her husband had not yet given up, but this did not save their marriage. Marcus then became a raw food eater, and then starved. More and more often, instead of having a glass or two with his wife and friends, he started to go to the forest, walk there for several hours and just enjoy nature. He found adherents on social networks. Almost all of them were men and unmarried. It was interesting for the aspiring vegan to observe the lifestyle of these freedom-loving guys through photos and videos on the internet. And increasingly he was disappearing outside the house, away from his family, his children, his wife, and his sick mother-in-law, with whom his relationship never worked out. I felt life. I had to change something in my destiny. He shared these sentiments with his friends more and more often. And then one day, lying on the sofa after another inspiring walk, Marcus looked at his wife and fussing children and realized he had to leave. As Marcus packed his things, Kimberly just lay motionless in the room. Sometimes it seemed like she was sobbing, but she had found out about her husband's decision a couple of days before he left, had an argument with him, even a bit of a fight, and then just realized there was nothing she could do about it. Marcus put his arm around his son and kissed the still uncomprehending Cassandra, who had been asking him all the way, "Dad, when are you coming?" And her question remained unanswered every time. Then the prodigal father, ready to leave the house with his bags, where a taxi was waiting for him in the street, looked at Marion, who was standing aside. He approached her slowly and said, "Marion, look for yourself." The girl looked at him questioningly. "Look for yourself. Look inside, you have a light. You're going to make it." "Okay," the daughter answered confusedly. This large family was left alone, without a father, without a breadwinner, without a protector. Now both mother, grandmother, and Marion, as the oldest members of the family, began to think more and more often about how to feed the children. Marion had felt lonely almost from childhood. She had friends, some of her classmates stayed in town. Most of them had moved to places more suitable for earning and living. One such friend was Gabrielle Jones. She had known Marion since first grade. They both sat in the fan seats at the outdoor stadium, where town sporting events were often held. Marion decided to tell her friend about the recent changes in their family. "So anyway, my dad left my family." "Really?" Gabrielle put both hands on her head, trying to act dramatic. "Yeah, he just left. Packed his things, said goodbye, said some rubbish to me." "What kind of stuff?" "Yeah, it was bullshit." Marion smirked. "Look for the fire inside," said the girl. Gabrielle laughed out loud, followed by the storyteller. They were both rolling on the floor with laughter. But then, calmed down, Marion went on again. "Yes, he's been strange lately. To tell you the truth, I didn't feel sorry for him." "Strange? What do you mean?" "Going into the woods, not eating meat, and all that." "Yeah." And anyway, Marion looked away and smiled faintly. She took out a packet of cigarettes. "What?" "What? Say what you want to say." "I don't even know." It was obvious that Marion hesitated to tell her, or to keep secret what lurked in her soul. She didn't know whether to tell even her best and time-honored friend at such moments. "Marion, we've known each other so long. Maybe I'm worried." Gabrielle bought her friend a smoke and she gave in. "Yeah, they say he's not my father. I don't know whether to believe it or not." "That's weird, who's saying that?" "Mrs. Cheryl from up the street, Mom and Dad's friends. I haven't heard it myself, but it's all come to me recently. It's so annoying to be told you've heard it somewhere. I mean, everyone's talking about it now." "Yes," said Gabrielle thoughtfully. All evening and all night, Marion worried about her decision to tell her friend about the rumor, for even she did not know if it was true. Marion had worked before her father and family left, but it was more of a part-time job than a full-time job. She handed out leaflets. She was a sales consultant in a clothing shop. She traveled with goods to various addresses in the city as a courier. Now it had been decided by the family council that Marion would go to New York to work. Kimberly had already managed to call her sister, who worked in one of the grocery shops of a large chain in the city. Catherine was a receptionist and had once long ago offered Kimberly a job at an open sales position. Kimberly had been taking care of the younger Cassandra at the time, and Marion couldn't sit with her since she was already moonlighting somewhere. When Marcus left, she remembered her sister's offer. It was Marion's first day of work. She was to come to the shop and talk to Mrs. Catherine and listen to a short lecture on her job description. Marion took her packing seriously. She put on dark trousers and her best, almost unworn jumper. Her mother saw her fiddling in the mirror and putting on her makeup. "Why are you going to be a shop assistant?" she said squeamishly and almost indifferently, standing on the threshold of her daughter's room. Marion made no reply. She had long ago reduced her intercourse with her mother to a minimum and spoke to her only on business. She loved her, of course, but it was easier this way. Marion had long felt that her mother's attitude to her was mainly consumerist, and she did not want to be personally convinced of it. This woman seldom cared for the girl's personal problems. Her name had long been associated in this family with the words, help, do, and fetch. It was a long drive from small town to big New York City, where Marion had only been a couple of times in her entire 19-year-old life. She was riding on the bus and listening to her favorite music on the player, looking around at the surrounding farms and small towns along the way. Suddenly, she felt sad. The girl thought about her life in her childhood. It turns out I hardly had one. She remembered quite the early years when there were 3 of them. Her mother and father. They had been younger, funnier, and friendlier then. Her mother would hug her at times, kiss her forehead, and her father would joke merrily, tossing his little girl in the air. Father and mother drank less. They were lively, but then brother Jack was born, and relations in the family, for some reason, deteriorated. Marion was only 8, and she already had to almost run from school to sit with the baby. From then on, the girl began to feel that she was no longer perceived as before, as a daughter, as a girl, as a living person who had a beating heart inside. More and more often she began to hear, "You must, don't forget," and other words containing requests, if not orders. And less often she received words of approval, care, and love. When Cassandra was born, Marion realized that she was certainly not going to have a carefree life now, and she was right. Jack went to school, and Kimberly had her 3rd child. Marcus began drinking more and participating less in the family's life. His wife, who had many children, soon had to look for work, as he quit his job and started looking for work himself. These searches were passive, and every time he was asked about his progress, he sadly replied that there were no suitable vacancies yet, that the salary at the interview was lower than the stated salary. There were many other reasons why he couldn't get a job at his working age, being a fit and healthy man. Kimberly understood that he had no desire to get up every weekday from his favorite sofa and deny himself daily drinks with friends and watching humorous TV shows and series about the police. But what was to be done? Her husband's temper was sometimes harsh, and he could, even when he was in a depressed mood, use his hands, but not against the children. All in all, Kimberly knew she shouldn't have disturbed him. She had also hoped that he would be involved with the kids, but that wasn't happening either. You did your homework and clean up after yourself. That was usually the extent of her father's attention. During this period, Kimberly began to look more and more closely at her eldest. She was already 14 years old when Cassandra was born. One day she told the girl bluntly, "I'm working, money is tight. You need to get a job too." Marion was a serious child, and after a month she started bringing in a small income for the family. She barely had enough for her own needs. She gave almost everything to her mother. Once Marion dared to ask her why her father did nothing, and then she regretted it for a long time. So many negative words and emotions in her direction she had never heard before, became very offended. And at that moment, everything changed in her soul. If her mother did not become her enemy, then her attitude to her, seemingly to the most dear person, became indifferent. Soon Kimberly noticed this change in her daughter, and instead of discussing with her the reason for her reticence, she began to respond in the same way. They were both bound together only by their concern for Jack and Cassandra. Marion became a second mother to these children. Kimberly was not only absent from work, sometimes she arrived very late, and no one knew what the real reason for her delays was. The sick grandmother was out of the picture in this family, and in that she and Marion were alike. She lay in her room and occasionally chatted with her grandchildren. There were medicines lying everywhere, and there was almost always a television on. Marion liked to share some of her less than obvious experiences with her, but as time went on, her grandmother began to feel worse and worse. She was in the hospital or just sleeping. Her grandchildren visited her less and less. On her face one day appeared an expression of indifference to life. All these moments of her life replayed in her head mysterious black-browed girl sitting on the last row in the bus, and sometimes her eyes filled with tears. Well, at least we'll have more money, so she comforted herself at the end of her heavy thoughts. Soon the announcement was made. New York terminus. Marion sighed. She wanted to ride in this old bus, to look at the trees at home and just think, dreaming of a better life that might never come. Marion got off the bus and slowly made her way towards the city center. The stop was located on the very outskirts of town. She saw a few older houses. They were located on an elevated area. The further she traveled towards the shop, the more modern scenery she encountered. Finally, she saw a large grocery shop. It was beautiful, all glass and with glowing letters on the roof. It was a very huge building. Marion walked inside the premises. There was an escalator running right in front of the entrance. On the ground floor, there were little stalls with balloons, with unusual lollipops and different bling. And all this colorful picture briefly caught the eye of a girl from a small town, who did not often come to such crowded places. First, she wanted to buy a beautiful knitted bracelet with stones. Then she looked long and fascinated at the golden statue of a dragon. "I'd like to take one of these home," Marion dreamed. After about 10 minutes of excitement, she remembered that she had not come to go shopping, but to get a job in a grocery shop. But where was it? So it's a shopping center, I guess, she thought. The signs said the grocery shop was on the first floor. At the shop, Aunt Catherine met her niece and immediately started telling her about the duties. There were a lot of them, and one had to listen carefully. Marion knew that Catherine didn't like to repeat herself and took her personality very seriously. Perhaps that was why she and Kimberly didn't get along very well. Her sister in conversation could take offense at nothing, but seriously. Marion was issued a uniform. She was assigned a mentor, a petite blonde woman of about 45 named Selena. She spoke quietly and quickly, sometimes even slurring her words. The girl's first day as a trainee was hectic but unnoticeable. With her anxious thoughts and running after Selena, Marion didn't notice how her shift ended. 9 p.m. "You can pack up." Her mentor walked up to her. "What about you?" "Me too. Let's go to the back room and change there." "Did I work well?" Marion asked. "Yes, you've been fine. It's hard to tell from the first day." Marion calmed down. For some reason, she thought she had made a lot of obvious mistakes, but it turned out that her mentor did not notice anything, or considered all her faults as insignificant. Either way, she was glad for the end of the day, even though no one had praised her. The main thing was that she hadn't messed anything up. So a month passed and Marion received her first salary, as well as her new position as a sales consultant. The probationary period past this event was the main success she had had recently. One day she came home and found her mother at home, peacefully making soup in the kitchen. Suddenly, for the first time in a long time, she wanted to share her achievement at work with her. She went into the kitchen, and she and her mother exchanged a few words. "No, I won't," Marion thought. "She's all about the money, and that's all that matters." Soon Marion had established herself in her position at the shop. She did her job splendidly and had no complaints about life. She was given a pay rise and once even made Employee of the Month. She was now used to sharing her successes only with herself. Her friend Gabrielle got married and moved in with her husband in Chicago. At times, Marion thought of her and even envied her happiness a little. Yet on the whole, she was content with what she had. The girl had become truly independent. And it was not only about financial independence, because now she could afford to spend more on herself. In addition to all this, she changed personally. She didn't need company at all. She didn't want to talk or listen to anyone. She worked and helped her mother with her children. It would seem that what else was needed for her? A person who had long been deprived of any ambitions. And yet she wanted to love. Marion tried to get into relationships with guys, But after a few short attempts, she realized that she didn't want to be with just anyone to have fun and arrange romantic evenings. All these young people were not in a hurry to be serious about Marion. "You're a little too outspoken." Gabrielle had hinted to her in the days when they still lived in the same town. "You're a bit, I'm sorry, not feminine, are you?" she once said. Marion tried to hide the feeling of offense, but she had a great complex in her heart. She was indeed a little coarse, her voice was low, her features, though beautiful, were in many ways boyish, her nose with a hump, her slightly extended manly lower jaw, and her eyes, those brown, thoughtful eyes, in which something deep, secret, and serious was read. It had been 2 years since Marion had taken a job with Aunt Catherine. She was 21 years old and in love. Stephen Howard worked as an area manager for a shopping center and occasionally went into the shop to check on the quality of the staff. He took a fancy to an unusual black-browed girl, and she took a fancy to him. He was tall, broad-shouldered. His expression always conveyed good-naturedness, and the high-browed, bony blonde named Stephen was liked by all the cashiers and saleswomen in the shop, and they were not shy about exchanging a few enthusiastic words among themselves after he left. Stephen had come on board later than Marion had started working here. For 6 months they exchanged glances, but one day Stephen did get bold enough to make the first move. She was standing at the meat counter. The shop was unusually small and the clerk had nothing to do. It was the right moment for the two of them. She heard behind her, "Girl, why are we standing there? Why are we not working?" It was funny that Marion, who was tired of working days from domestic cares with her brother and sister, at first reacted to the manager's remark sharply and negatively. She turned round and stared at the man with her deep and intense gaze, squinting her thick, dark eyebrows. "I work when there's work to be done. Are all the shelves filled with merchandise? Customers don't need counseling? Is the warehouse in order?" In a monotonous and slightly raised tone, Stephen bombarded the young saleswoman with work-related questions. She stood in silence for a few seconds, not taking her stern gaze off the man, of course, realizing that she would be in trouble if she continued to be rude. It was obvious that she was facing a representative of the management. However, being in a bad mood and hurt by the phrase about idleness in her address, as well as unpleasant questions that sounded like complaints, she could not keep her discontent to herself. "I've worked here for 2 years and no one has ever complained about me. If you want to be the first to do so, be my guest." Marion had that unpleasant quality from childhood. She sometimes could not hold back her sudden anger. She'd had a couple of fights at school, the so-called shooters. There were also attacks of uncontrolled aggression, but all these moments were rare because at home reigned complete indifference. And it would be strange to behave in such a way when neither mother nor father even asked you questions about your affairs, not to mention serious conversations about studies, personal life, or smoking. Standing in front of a shop management representative. For the first time in years, Marion remembered her peculiarity. Her face was covered with color, her eyes glistened, and in her soul there was both dislike and fear for her position, without which she had not seen a full life for herself and her family for a long time. Everything hung on this fragile girl. Suddenly, the stern expression on Stephen's face changed to one of mortification and contentment. He looked at the name on her badge and said in a good-natured tone, as if afraid of her hurt feelings, "Marion, I don't know your patronymic, but I can see that you are a man of character, and I hope you have a good sense of duty. A man like you should be. I didn't mean to offend you in any way. I am here to make our business grow and become as profitable as possible." Marion made no reply, but felt as if the manager still had something to say. She was not mistaken. And he continued after a short pause. "How do you get on here?" "I can't complain," she mumbled. She wanted to go to the warehouse, but sensing that the beautiful and daring and even more beautiful girl wanted to leave, Stephen decided to act immediately. He had already spent 6 months looking for her casually through the stalls. "Marion, let me give you my number, so you can be my assistant and keep me informed of how things are going in the warehouse." Marion smirked. She had calmed down a bit, and instead of irritation, there was curiosity. "What do you want me to do? Rat out my colleagues?" "I'm sorry, doing what?" Stephen smiled just as amiably. "Marion, I'm just collecting employee numbers. But they're on the database, if anything." The manager was not angry with Marion. On the contrary, he found her a very interesting person, and all her mockery, inappropriate grimaces, like a lack of etiquette when talking to the bosses, only made him angry. He wanted to know more about the girl. All right, in base, so in base I'll write to you, go to the warehouse. Marion went away. She was filled with one great and vivid feeling. No, it was not anger. It was love at its most embryonic stage, when we are not yet sure of our feelings, and are ashamed of ourselves, ashamed of our thoughts about the person, for we know nothing about him. The same thing was happening to Marion when she just stood in the warehouse by the boxes and did not move, because her new thoughts prevented her from concentrating. Manager, what did he want from me? Bullshit. After a peculiar interaction with the new employee, Stephen approached Selena. Who is this hooligan you have working here? He smiled at the saleswoman. Morris. Selena sighed. I think she's Mrs. Catherine's niece. That's all I know. How's the job? We're responsible. Not bad, helpful. All right, thanks, I'll be off. Stephen left the shop in a pleasant thoughtfulness, and afterwards thought for a long time about the young tall brunette with a serious and beautiful look of big brown eyes. For a long time, neither Marion nor Stephen forced themselves to continue this informal chat. Stephen arrived a couple of weeks later. He didn't write or call her as he had promised. After chatting with the manager, the man in love immediately approached Marion and said in a loud voice, "We need to talk. Please go to the warehouse." There were salesgirls and the manager around, still not far away, and the manager did not at all want to be judged by the junior staff here in the future. He was merely pretending that he intended to reprimand the salesgirl. Marion was frightened for a moment, forsook thoughts of the beauty of her lover's eyes and lips, which in a fortnight had bored her, and thought of the dreadful thing, which was the word dismissal. They both walked slowly towards the warehouse. There was no one there, and the only witnesses to Stephen's forthcoming revelations would be the numerous boxes of foodstuffs. Marion, I'll tell you straight away, no complaints. She looked questioningly at her boss. I like you here, round and round. I do not want to go round. I want to try to communicate with you. She looked somewhere to the side, down, and smiled sweetly and embarrassedly, as if wanting to answer something. Her lips involuntarily shook, and a slight, but still noticeable to the interlocutor paint, covered all her beautiful face. Well, you think, here's my number. Marion took from the man a small white card with printed lettering and logo. As he walked away, she examined it. Stephen Howard, business consultant. Below it in even smaller print was a list of his services and his phone number, the most important thing for which this business card had been handed to her. It was a beautiful time, spring. It was around this time that Marion and Stephen began dating. They didn't advertise their relationship. The territorial manager came to the shop as usual, a couple of times a month, and communicated only with those with whom he was supposed to communicate by work. He and Marion even tried not to look at each other. One day during a smoke break, Selena brought up Stephen. There were 3 female shop workers standing outside in a circle. They should have finished their smoke break sooner rather than later, as the shop was left to 2 people, one of whom was a young girl who, just like Marion, had come here a couple of years ago and knew next to nothing. Molly, the cashier, put out her cigarette butt on the rubbish bin and, carefully dropping it there, walked off into the building with a quick step. Selena and Marion took quick puffs to finish their cigarettes and go to their seats. And our Stephen's all right, Selena, who was not particularly noted for her participation in gossip, replied cryptically. Who do you mean, Selena? Marion asked, though she knew it could only be about the manager. Stephen Howard. Yeah, he seems nice. Marion, are you 2 dating by any chance? Selena asked, and the question changed the expression on her colleague's face. No. What makes you think that? Well, I don't know, it just seemed like an experience. I don't know what your experience is. You're paying attention to the wrong things, Marion snorted unfriendly. Maybe not, but just in case he's just not your best option, it's best not to get involved. Marion didn't say anything back to her. She was surprised by her colleague's words. She didn't understand why Selena started to be frank about her boss, and why she was so sure of their connection. The saleswoman wasn't fooling her, though. She had indeed speculated and just guessed that was what was called experience. The quiet, silent worker, who had never been seen discussing colleagues before, suddenly decided to share her suspicions about Stephen with the young employee. Perhaps Selena recognized Marion as herself, and Stephen resembled someone from her past life. The feelings and thoughts that had prompted her to talk remained unknown to Marion. Marion had been her own person for a long time, and she made all her own decisions. She didn't rely on anyone, and she didn't count on anyone. Stephen was a ray of sunshine that had suddenly come into her life. He was a real grown man, capable of courtship, gifts and displays of affection. Marian had never met a man like him before. All the few partners she'd had were boys, not men, and it wasn't even a matter of age. All they could offer was a trip to a cafe and a sleepover at their house when her parents were away. Stephen, on the other hand, was a wealthy man. He was 30 years old and had already been living alone for several years in his own flat, which he had partly earned himself. His parents were honorable, educated people and wished their son a similarly honorable party. They were both university professors, and many of their students seemed to them good candidates for the role of their son's future wife. But Stephen often referred to the busyness at work and did not come to these nice acquaintances, and if he did, all communication ended with a banal gesture of propriety. He walked the student home and wished her good night. It's not like that. Each time Stephen complained to his parents, begging them to stop these useless acquaintances. His father and mother were genuinely perplexed and asked their son what he wanted. And he only answered, "I'm a grown-up uncle. I'll sort it out myself." So what did the 30-year-old territorial manager of a large grocery chain, Stephen Howard, really want? Firstly, the man was somewhat annoyed by any desire of people, even his closest relatives, to dictate his life. He was used to being the king of his life, and only circumstances that happened to us not of our own free will could change his trajectory. No one in this world was an authority to him, only himself. Some of Stephen's acquaintances called his characteristic overconfidence. And more than once he was advised to listen to the opinions of others, and yet he did things his own way. When he succeeded in his career, he clearly realized that he was on the right path. Strangely enough, he had no clear goal in matters personal. Stephen did not strive, as his parents put it, to find a worthy party, although he was already 30. Perhaps romance lived in this purposeful and pragmatic man. There wasn't much of it, but he, just like his new love Marian, believed that you just had to find your man. It didn't matter to him that his girlfriend hadn't accomplished much in life and worked at the grocery shop in the lowest position. He liked her dark, always, as if on something focused eyes and rough, but at the same time so beautiful and attractive features of the face. Yes, he felt in this difficult, silent girl his own man. Marian had almost ceased to sleep at home. Her mother, of course, was not happy with her, although now their financial situation had improved markedly, and her daughter threw a certain amount of money into her account every month. Since Marian began to date Stephen, the amount became even greater. It was because the young man was giving her money for personal expenses, which meant that the mother was now allowed to throw even more money. Marian understood and didn't argue with her when she spoke. "You have decided to pay us off," she replied. "Yes, you may consider it so," and went to work and then to Stephen's house for the night. Stephen was in no hurry to offer to move Marian into his flat. What was it he couldn't exactly figure it out himself? Perhaps it was some insecurity about his feelings. Or maybe, despite his independence, he was still afraid of his honorable parents and ashamed of the 22-year-old shop assistant who had been his girlfriend for 6 months. In any case, after some time in the soul of this successful man, there was a certain dissonance. He as if began to slowly retreat back. 6 months later came the crisis in this unequal relationship. Marian, tired and broken, came home more and more often to spend the night. Stephen looked for all sorts of excuses not to invite her over. Her mother smirked one day when she saw her daughter on the doorstep late at night. "What, did he leave you?" Marian answered her nothing, by the way. She did not tell her a word about her young man. And so several months passed. Both did not know what to do to end this relationship once and for all, or to continue to meet in the same format, but experienced constant psychological discomfort. They arranged a warm meeting on Valentine's Day. It was a chance to set the record straight, to forgive each other for offenses and deal with misunderstandings and understatements. As luck would have it, Marian got some unpleasant news. One of the saleswomen was sick, and there was no one to work the night shift. "Marian, but I'm begging you to come out. You'll be well paid." The manager begged her. "But I have plans for tonight." Marian replied grudgingly. Probably if the manager had known with whom Marian was going to spend the evenings then, she would certainly have looked for someone else. "I'm begging you. I'll get on my knees." "All right, Bridget, don't. I'll go out." A sense of responsibility had been instilled in her from childhood, not by her mother, not by her father, but by life. and Marion couldn't refuse to help the shop she'd been working in for over a year. Still at the end of her shift, she kept walking around, twisting and turning the phone in her hands, typing and deleting text again. For some reason it seemed to the girl that if she didn't make it, her and Stephen's relationship would be over forever. Yes, she had become a little dependent on him. She liked his advances, the fact that he was a wealthy and mature man, but most importantly, having had no experience of a really serious relationship with men before, Marion quickly got used to him. Somehow she thought that this choice was the best, and she would never get another chance to find a suitable life partner. Stephen was indeed good-looking and well-to-do, but did he love her? She didn't want to think about it, because somewhere in the back of her mind, her heart felt unreciprocated. Finally, it was 9 p.m. The second shift had begun. Marion knew she had to be at Stephen's at 9:30 p.m. She had to dare to text. "I'll write it as it is. He'll think I'm responsible. He's the boss here," Marion tried to reassure herself. She picked up her phone and looked at the screen. One new message. It was Stephen. What was he trying to tell her? Marion opened the message. "Sunshine, please forgive me. I can't make it today. I'll be in an important meeting." How easy and convenient it is, being a member of the administration, to refer to important, usually unscheduled meetings. Stephen had used his position more than once to make up another story about these very important matters, but Marion had no choice but to believe him. After all, if there was no trust, then why keep in touch with the man? She wrote him that she was also busy, that she was put on the night shift, using the warmest and sweetest words. Stephen felt sorry for his girlfriend and wished her a brisk shift. Almost 3 hours passed, there were less and less people in the shop, and thus less work too. Marion was thinking more about her personal problems than about customer requests and groceries. It was unusual for her to work after 9 o'clock, and she was beginning to feel a little drowsy. There was a sudden appearance. Scarlett appeared in the shop, the same sickly shop assistant. Marion was a little puzzled. What was she to do now? "Marion, hi. It's okay, I can do it. I'm free," the woman said. "Yes, but Bridget." I rang. Marion shrugged. She went to the back room to change. She hated to humiliate herself in front of Stephen, but his flat was the only place close to the shop where she could spend the night. She realized he had no intention of seeing her. He might already be asleep or out of the house, but it was still better than catching a taxi in a foreign city past midnight. Maybe he'll at least pay for my taxi, she thought. As it happened, Marion had hardly any money with her, and she certainly wouldn't have enough for the ride home. After 3 messages asking for a bed for the night, or at least for help, Marion began to call Stephen, but all her efforts were in vain. He must have been very busy. She stepped outside, breathed the fresh February air into her chest, and headed for the bus stop. There are times when you know you're doing something reckless, but you walk on, as if you're too lazy to stop, think, and make another, more difficult decision. That's what happened to Marion, who all in her thoughts walked slowly to the bus stop, knowing that all the buses had long since gone away. Marion sat down on the bench once more, checking her phone just in case. It hadn't received a single call, not a single message. Of course, she could have called one of her friends and mates, asked to borrow money and hail a taxi. She could have gone back to the shop and spent the night in the back, but her eyes fell on the very few old houses she had noticed the first time she had come here for a job interview. The houses were old and shabby, but still people lived there. Marion was sure that on the ranch there would be some old man or woman who would be kind enough to shelter her till morning and give her a good meal. At least that's what fairy tales and good films and serials about lost people teach us. She walked towards the houses. A window was burning in one of them. Without thinking long, Marion headed towards the light. She approached the wicket, in the yard of the property through the darkness. The girl saw a large foreign car that looked like an SUV. Though the wicket was closed, the hook could be easily lifted from outside the lot. Marion decided to go in to knock on the door. She reckoned that was what the locals here did. Slowly moving around the lot, she got a little look at the property. There was probably a garden under the windows. There were pegs sticking out from under the snowdrifts that looked like the planks of an ornamental fence. There were fruit trees growing close to the fence. She knocked on the door, and a man soon came knocking. "Who's there?" said a tall male voice. "I missed the bus. I don't know what to do." Well, the man said slyly. He sounded elderly. Marian saw before her a skinny old man a little taller than herself with a long beard and sparse long hair. He was gray-haired. His thin features did not have a particularly aged look. On the contrary, there was something naive, childlike about them. The old man looked at Marian and smiled. He expected to hear her story. "I didn't catch the bus. I don't know what to do." "Aha, aha." The grandfather said fluently, "I heard that." In short, "I don't want to beat around the bush. Can I sleep over?" "Sure, come in, come in." Marian at first became frightened. Crossing the threshold of the house, she felt some hostile aura and even wanted to leave. But the old man turned and said good-naturedly, as if sensing that his manners were not to the liking of the uninvited guest, "We have only good people here, and everybody knows me, and I know everybody. Don't worry, girl. Lie down in a small room and rest until morning." The lively interest in his eyes and sly voice dissolved somewhere, and Marian became easier to communicate with this man. She remembered about the foreign car in the yard. "Do you drive?" My son drives. He comes here with his wife. This time he decided to leave it here. I don't know why." Grandpa went to the kitchen to put the kettle on, and from the kitchen I heard something. "Do you want something to eat?" "No, thanks." "Well, at least store-bought cakes with tea," replied the guest. While grandfather was fussing in the kitchen, Marian began to look at his home. It was quite decent. There was a plasma TV on the bedside table, and although the furniture was simple and old-looking, the house was clean and tidy. The sofa was populated with a new bedspread of expensive fabric. It seemed as if someone was constantly caring for this dwelling, and judging by the nature of that care, it was hardly the owner. "Yes, my name is Michael Taylor." An elderly man came into the living room with a plate of cakes in his hands. "Marian." The girl sighed tiredly. "Are you sleepy? I'll get some tea." He left again, and Marian felt her heart finally calm down and beat in a familiar rhythm. Marian ate the cakes and drank tea alone, and the master went away again. He came half an hour later and announced that the room was ready. She had gone to spend the night in a strange place, lying in a strange bed, and this moment, of course, embarrassed her. Lying under the covers, she stared at the burning screen of her phone. Such a strange thing was happening to her. She wanted to share her impressions with at least someone, but then she realized, who should I write to? And having put the phone on the bedside table, she fell asleep in the sound sleep of a baby. Tired and spiritually distressed for the day, Marian decided to get out of bed as soon as her eyes opened for the first time that morning. Despite Michael Taylor's apparent hospitality and kindness, she felt uncomfortable being in someone else's home. She glanced at the clock on her phone, 5:27 a.m. Getting up at this hour was certainly difficult, but still Marian made an effort on herself. If I pack quickly, I can catch the bus, she thought. Marian sat down on the edge of the bed and stretched, slowly so as not to wake the elderly owner of the house. She tucked her phone and charger into her bag, looked in the small mirror that hung on the wall, and opened the door to the living room as carefully as she could. The landlord was apparently asleep. He was lying on the sofa, covered with a plaid, with his back to the exit. A few steps separated the girl from the exit. She paused. Maybe I should thank him. At least say something. No, I won't make the bus. She turned towards the door and continued her slow step. After a few seconds, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It couldn't be anyone else. Marian turned around. A satisfied Michael Taylor stood in front of her with a sly smile that pushed her away, still last night. It wasn't as if the man had just woken up. It was as if he had been invisibly watching his guest since the moment she awoke. Marian became frightened. She was a truly desperate girl at times, and yet she was the weaker sex. And there was a strange man standing in front of her, and this man was clearly not going to let her go. Michael now seemed stronger, taller, and more confident to her. Were these sensations contrived from fear, or had the master, all the time the girl had been in his possession, been trying to appear feeble, bending and grimacing to make Marian believe he was pitying her? She did not know, but it was urgent to get out of this house and not make a mess of things. "Darling, where are you going? And who's going to pay for it?" He gave his victim a sly look. "Look, I'm going to leave now. I have no money, but I'll pay you back. Now I can." Marian began to dig frantically in her bag to find her purse. She pulled it out and took out several 100 notes. "Hisham, The old man chuckled softly. "Do you have a phone number? I'll text it to you or your son. Here's 400. Put the money away." Breathing heavily, Michael said. The elderly owner abruptly sat down and began to pull off the girl her dark, tight skirt, which she had decided to wear the day before, as February had been warm and sunny lately. Marion immediately began to struggle with the rascal. She tried for his shoulders to push him away from her, but he pressed himself against her, wrapping his arms around her legs. Marion felt as if she were falling. They lay struggling for a while. Michael slapped Marion on the cheek. "Shut up and obey, or you'll get in trouble. I'll say you attacked the old man." Marion didn't expect that this man could be so dangerous and strong. She started to scream, and he immediately put his hand over her mouth. Feeling that he had little strength to completely defeat the girl, Michael began to beat her mercilessly on the face, trying to suppress her will, but he did not know that Marion had in her soul so strong an undisclosed anger that only give the will to show itself and terrible things would happen. This anger was like a sleeping bear that had been teased by people. The more they irritate him, the stronger his desire to tear his offenders, and only the cage separates fools from death. Unfortunately for Michael Taylor, a lusty old man, who thought of raping a girl in unpleasant circumstances in the middle of the night, Marion was a warrior in her 22 years. She herself didn't fully know what she was capable of. The blows to her face had pissed her off, and she no longer saw the lonely old man in front of her as a monster and a murderer. Marion bit into his neck, and he loosened his grip a little and groaned. Still, it wasn't working to break free from his tight embrace. Michael continued to beat his victim. At some point, she felt sick to her stomach and decided that this was the end. She was ready for violence to stay alive. Her skirt was almost off. The scumbag was already fumbling with her underwear. Marion could not stand this nightmare. She suddenly screamed so frantically that Michael was just in a daze and finally let her get free. It seemed to run free, call people for help, but this feeling couldn't stop. It was charged and demanded some sort of outlet. Marion, strangely enough, in defiance of the sense of self-preservation she had had until a few minutes ago, took a sharp step towards the kitchen. From there she picked up the heaviest-looking utensil, a cast-iron skillet, and dashed into the room. Before she realized it, Michael was lifting himself up on his hands to get up, but he was still sitting on the floor. He instantly became the victim, not the hunter. Terrified, the old man looked at the furious girl with the frying pan and only had time to open his mouth, probably preparing an exculpatory speech, pitying words to be pitied and spared, but it was not to be. A blow, another blow, and he fell to the floor, sprawled on it senseless. Marion didn't know if her attacker was still alive, but she immediately called an ambulance and the police. She sat at her desk in a small armchair beside the body of her failed rapist and propped her cheek with the palm of her hand. Thoughts of criminal responsibility began to cross her mind. At 16, when she was still at school, she'd been interested in the law for a while. At home, there was a thick book on the shelves called Legislation. At first, Marion just opened and closed it, and then for fun began to learn by heart the names of articles and their numbers. The number 105 came to mind. Would I get 105 or not? Would I have a chance of not going to jail? This is self-defense. Marion was not sure that she would not be given the article for murder, but she was more inclined to manslaughter. In any case, the girl was scared, because in front of her, perhaps there was a corpse of a man and an elderly man, and she was in someone else's house. Marion went to the mirror. Her face was already beginning to show signs of beatings, and that was to her advantage. She calmed down a bit, sat back in her chair, and continued to wait for the police and ambulance. Finally, after half an hour, Marion waited for the one she had been anxiously awaiting. It was still dark outside, and the people of the neighboring houses must have been asleep, but on hearing the noise of the cars, the gawkers hurried out from behind their fences, and there were those who formed a large crowd around Michael Taylor's property. Murdered my granddad, the bastards, thieves, I suppose. He'd been giving up lately. These and many other phrases from the gawkers could be heard by ambulance and police officers. "What happened?" shouted a woman from the crowd. "We're looking into it," replied the paramedic briefly. People wanted the truth. They were eager to know it. They couldn't just leave the place and wait for the first rumors from the most clever neighbors in the area. Michael Taylor was generally well regarded by the people, though he had not lived here long. Most people thought he was a peaceful and quiet grandfather, cared for at times by his son and daughter-in-law. The police asked Marian a few questions, to which she answered as honestly as possible, believing there was nothing to hide, and concealment of the facts of what had happened, as she knew, was punishable by law. The girl was put into a police car, and as she walked along, accompanied by 2 men in uniform, people stared at her in silence. When she got into the car, people started whispering among themselves again. What a nightmare. These young people have gone, shouted someone from the crowd. A little later, the doctors finished their work and carried out an elderly man on a stretcher. His face was not covered, and the villagers, seeing this, breathed a sigh of relief. The police had left, the ambulance had left, forensic experts had rushed to the scene. There was nothing to see here, as they were mostly inside the house. People went to their homes to sleep, and some people went about their daily business. The women, who were particularly impressionable, could not recover from what they had seen for a long time. They became afraid for their own lives. Nothing illegal had ever happened in this area, and no one, of course, did not expect that a murderer would come to the quiet place where mostly pensioners lived. A little later, grandparents began to go to each other and discuss what had happened. Some were even pleased that something worthwhile could finally be discussed. Barbara stopped by to see her friend Vanessa. "Vanessa, did you hear? Did you see what happened? Everyone's alive, old people are being slaughtered. Why, what was Michael's problem?" "Yeah, I saw and heard. I was standing there this morning." "What do they say?" "She's a young girl." "She was young, but the weird thing is, she called the police and the ambulance." "Wait, what are you doing?" Barbara glared at her friend. "You're justifying her." "She's not here. I'm just saying it's weird. They're all bastards. They don't spare us old people. She came in, she wanted money, she wanted to make a profit, and Michael turned her down." "Yeah, I guess that's what happened." Prejudice was firmly planted in the woman's mind. She couldn't imagine anyone making excuses for someone who'd done grievous bodily harm to an elderly man. Not she. No one else in the area wanted to think that Michael Taylor was at fault, even though everyone knew that the girl had not run away but had stayed at his house until the police and ambulance arrived. And everyone knew about the oddities of the grandfather living at the entrance to the village. Marian was young and healthy, her victim, on the contrary, elderly and weak. And who would have thought that he wanted to rape his overnight guest, who out of desperation had risked spending the night with one of the residents of this ill-fated neighborhood? The investigation began. Michael was still in intensive care, but the doctors gave him a positive prognosis. Marian recounted all the details. She indicated the approximate time of events, talked about the nuances, answered all the questions put to her. In general, actively cooperated with the investigation, and the investigators saw that she was sincere, and her eyes were burning with the desire to get out of the detention center as soon as possible, to be acquitted. It was not only her unenviable position that marred Marian. Perhaps even more unpleasant was the fact that during her 5 days in the detention center she had never been contacted. There had been no messages or calls from either her mother or Stephen. Marian had wanted to call them both several times, but had hesitated. Something kept her from doing so. She wanted to be interested and waited for the call. So she felt that besides anxious thoughts about her future fate, she had other worries on her mind. And though they were not good either, yet in this way the girl was able to dilute her fear a little. Marian realized that she needed a good lawyer, and she still couldn't stand it. And while the investigation was dragging on and Michael had not yet come to his senses, it was worth worrying about her defense. After 5 days in the detention center, she called Stephen and told him everything. "Really, why didn't you call before?" he asked in confusion. "I was hoping you would call." Stephen had nothing to reply to these words. He really hadn't been concerned about her all these 5 days. Marian had only called the shop manager, and Marian thought that she might have told the others about her trouble. But to her surprise, her beloved Stephen knew nothing. "Do you need a lawyer?" he asked Marian. "Yes, I'm ashamed to ask for your help, but if you don't, no one will." "Tell me, didn't you defend yourself?" "Yes, I told everything to the investigation. Why such questions, Stephen?" Marian experienced emotional tension and was even annoyed when she heard the words of doubt from Stephen. He hurriedly reassured her. "Marian, it's okay, calm down. At least come and check on me. The lawyer will be you in which detention center you are sitting." Marian told him the number of the detention center. When she hung up, she realized that he didn't even want to visit her. He was evasive. Marian never called her mother. Somehow she wasn't particularly surprised by this. Disinterest in her daughter's life was a trait that had characterized Kimberly almost all her life. She had always regarded the girl as an obligation. And now, after a week without hearing from her, she concluded that she would come forward sooner or later. But if she is in distress, this important question was absent from the mother's mind in grief. "Morris, you have a visitor." Marion heard from the guard. A lawyer had come to see her, and her first question to him was, "Who are you from?" Stephen had not lied. He had sent his man to her, and he was ready to take up her case seriously and intimately. Mr. Christopher immediately reassured the defendant. "It's not a difficult case, just tell it like it is." Marion sighed, having to recall again the terrible story of the lustful owner of the house on the edge of the city. After about 20 minutes of careful listening, Mr. Christopher, a thin man, brunette, glasses, with a concentrated face, crossed his palms and moved a little closer to the accused. "You've done well. This is all very important. I think we're going to win this case." "I'd like to believe that." Shaking her head slightly, sadly, looking somewhere away, Marion said, "You know, by the way, that our Michael Taylor is already in the ward. Awake, will soon testify." A strong color stuck to Marion's face. She was frightened. This must be bad. "Believe me, I have a lot of experience in these cases. He won't make it. Of course he'll tell his stories. It's a very good thing you're left with a clear beating. You have no motive. You stayed at the scene of the crime. Nothing was stolen. You can just calm down and wait for the exit." Mr. Christopher collected his papers in his briefcase, and after saying goodbye and wishing Marion patience, he left. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Well, you tell me, come on." A large, tall man in shirt and trousers almost ran into the room. He looked about 40 years old and was in an agitated state. "How did they let you in? Quarantine?" The grandfather looked at his son in surprise. "Dad, they let me in, and let me in." The man sat down on a chair near his father's bed. He looked at him patiently, waiting for some explanation of what had happened. "Why, you don't know anything yourself, lawyer." "Dad, I know everything. I want to hear you. Is she some kind of psychopath?" "She didn't even take anything. She wanted to kill me." Michael got up from the bed in a state of near rage. Well, calm down, Dad," calmed his son, gently put his hands on his shoulders. Lie down, rest if you want. Let's not talk about it now." "No, you started it. I'll continue. Sadist, she wanted to kill me." "How do I know why?" Michael Taylor was clearly in a bad mood. His son Edward was determined to derail the conversation. In between asking him questions about his health, about the hospital kitchen and the doctors, he decided that he would have to come again when his father had calmed down and was ready to talk about what had happened in his home without emotion. For Marion, the time spent in the isolation ward dragged on at a terribly slow pace. Mr. Christopher had failed to fully convince her that her actions would qualify as self-defense. Some uncomfortable feeling could not leave her, as if everything was not so simple in this case. On the eve of the hearing, Mr. Christopher once again went to see his client. He was in high spirits and simply confident of victory. "Marion, don't worry. Everything will be fine. Tomorrow be sure and say everything as you told me. You were in agitation, plus self-defense, attempted rape. That'll put our Michael Taylor in jail," Marion's lawyer said with a smile on his face. The convict was silent for most of this conversation, just nodding and occasionally speaking. "I see." The closer the trial got, the more anxious she felt. The night before the trial, Marion remembered her mother, brother, and sister. She had a strange feeling that the family had a life of its own, and that they were not her own people. Little by little, she began to involuntarily forget their images and memories associated with the house. The trial began in the morning. Marion prepared herself for the trial. She had her hair combed and even put on a little makeup and wore a clean change of clothes that she had taken with her to the detention center. She looked like a normal, decent, and civilized girl. The image at the trial had to play a positive role. In her case, it was important. Many had already labeled Marion a dangerous criminal, a marginal, and a thief. There were rumors that Michael was not the first victim of the killer, and that she dealt exclusively with lonely pensioners. But this time she had a serious client. Everyone in the area knew of Marion's blunder. Marion sat behind the bar and watched the people entering the hall. She said hello to Mr. Christopher, and he once again cheered her up by saying, "It's going to be fine. Marion Morris. Some of Michael's neighbors came in. Marion hadn't seen them, of course, and wouldn't remember them, but they were elderly people, outwardly different from the city folk, and she concluded that it was Michael's support group that had come. She saw him too, but immediately looked away. He still disgusted her. Sitting next to him was apparently his lawyer, a tall, statuesque man in his mid-40s. The most unexpected thing for the defendant happened when a woman and her teenage son, who were very familiar to her, entered the courtroom. It was Kimberly and Jack, Marion's mother and brother. She stared at them for a long moment, wonderingly trying to meet her mother's gaze. Jack waved his hand to his sister, but her mother immediately cut him off. She did not look at her daughter, feeling that she was looking at her. Why did she come here? And with Jack thought Marion. The hearing of the case began. When Michael's lawyer introduced himself to Marion, she turned pale. His last name was Taylor, the same as her abuser's. She stared at his face, then shifted her gaze to the victim. Yes, they did look alike. Was it really his relative? His son Marion no longer expected anything good from this trial. Though her defender, Mr. Christopher, looked quite confident in his statement, but when his opponent began his speech, he began to listen carefully to his words. The speech was filled with complex language, and everyone with a little knowledge of the law realized that this man was serious and knew his case well. Many were also struck by the emotionality with which he spoke about the case. Especially attentive guessed what was the reason for such an ardent concern of the lawyer to the old victim, who risked to become the accused that day. Alas, it did not happen. Against all sound logic, against Mr. Christopher's efforts, and against all the facts that had been presented to the court, Marion was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment for robbery. Hearing the judge's words, Mr. Christopher's face changed. What assault? He addressed the judge so that no one could hear him. What's the matter with you? Mr. Christopher, sit down and calm down. You'll appeal if you have to. The judge answered him calmly. The man looked shattered. He had lost a rare event in his 20 years of practice. Marion saw the bailiffs as they approached. She watched Mr. Christopher's face, hoping he would look at her, though she didn't know why she wanted to make contact with him. He stood gloomily for a moment in one place, and pretending to be so puzzled that he had forgotten Marion, walked slowly towards the exit. Mr. Christopher, what now? Marion shouted. The bailiffs had already entered the defendant's cell, the girl's eyes filled with tears. Mr. Christopher disappeared into the crowd of spectators leaving the hall. Marion was still in the detention center for some time. She kept waiting for Stephen's call, still unwilling to accept the fact that she would soon be a prisoner. Maybe they'll reconsider, appeal, she thought, sitting within the 4 walls of this horrible room she was never supposed to enter. Finally, Marion got a phone call. It was her young man, though she wasn't sure anymore. His voice was initially depressed, and that didn't bode well for Marion. Well, what is it? In a pleading voice she asked. Yes, Marion, you see, Mr. Christopher is a very good lawyer. I paid him a lot. He didn't expect this, you know. The thing is, this Edward, he's the freak's son. But not only that. What else? He's a powerful lawyer. I heard that Michael, this weirdo in there with them, did not want to live with them in the city. Wanted to his native village, where he grew up. All these long summarizations were not only unnecessary for Marion, but also irritating. Unable to bear it any longer, she asked Stephen. Why are you telling me all this? Is it bad or not? Marion, I don't have that much money. Mr. Christopher told me the amount, but it's a lot too. Others will take even more. And this one is an acquaintance. How much, Stephen? Marion asked, almost crying. Well, 1 million. We, of course, on friendly terms, agreed that half of the amount in case of loss he will return. But you know, 100,000,000 I cannot get nowhere. But it's just 1 million. Stephen, I'm going down, you know. There was an uncomfortable silence at both ends of the wire. Stephen kept silent because he didn't want to offend or upset the girl. Marion said nothing. She waited for his final answer. Marion, finally softly spoke Stephen. Well, first of all, it is a colony of settlement. It is not strict regime. And secondly, well, 5 years and parole. I'm sure you will go out on parole. These words were too horrible for Marion. She hung up the phone. Marion, hello? On this day, Territorial Superintendent Stephen Howard decided to take no further interest in this girl's life. When she tried to call him for help and made her most fatal and possibly stupid decision of her life to go to a sleepover with a stranger, he was having a great time with a nice lady who had been waiting for reciprocation from him for a long time. Lately, Stephen had been unsure of his feelings for the young and simple girl Marion, because one way or another he was influenced by the opinion of those around him. He was independent and had no authority, but one day he himself thought that he felt uncomfortable in the company of a shop girl, or maybe he just took and changed because people change. Marion Morris, a 24-year-old shop assistant at a grocery shop chain. The girl, circumstances that one day did not work out in her favor, went to the colony. At first she was scared, but fortunately in the colony of settlement lived, and quite decent, not broken by prison women. It was to such women that the newcomer tried to get closer. Still, sometimes she had to show her teeth here. Like in the men's prison, this colony had its own chief or pahanka. Her name was Jennifer, and this was the 4th time she had been here. One had to respect this imposing woman with a not very feminine tattoo on her arm. There were always a few female settlers walking beside her like jackals. All of these women were unpleasant in appearance. From their appearance you could roughly determine their articles. One was a thief with experience. Another killed her husband in another drunkenness. But Jennifer herself, already in the 4th time, caught in a major fraud. She began her dirty career with an assistant to a serious businessman and part-time criminal mastermind of the city, and it was back in the 90s. Young Jennifer liked to live life to the fullest, and even after the first walk, she decided not to stop there and become even more successful. Except that the woman never wanted to earn according to conscience. She had no children, no husbands, and somewhere in her hometown remained an unhappy mother. Not long ago, who learned from neighbors about the criminal biography of her daughter, Jennifer all told her that she went abroad for a long time, and she piously believed her and even rejoiced for her in anticipation of seeing her only beloved daughter again. But through one of her neighbors, the truth was accidentally revealed. It was before Jennifer's last conviction. She and her mother had had a terrible fight, and in her heart, her daughter called her some very nasty words and left. A few weeks later, she had another case she wanted to drop because it was quite a risky move, but remembering the difficult conversation with her mother, she decided, okay, nobody needs me here anyway. And again, Jennifer and several of her partners had to go to jail for fraud. Marion was settling in. It wasn't so bad. She found something new to do here. She started sewing often, even when her working hours were over. She was also fond of beading, and this activity calmed her and temporarily removed all bad thoughts from her head. Somewhere in the sewing room on a shelf there was a magazine with weaving schemes. That afternoon Marion studied it and asked one of the inmates, the shop manager, to get some beads so that she could make crafts from the magazine. Margaret, the supervisor's name, was a kind and understanding person, and to Marion's delight, in a couple of days she brought her a large amount of material for her new creation. Her meditations, sitting on her bunk and threading the little balls on the thread one by one, Marion began to forget all her troubles, enjoying her work, which almost from the beginning she had been doing well. Interrupting her positive thoughts, 4 women entered the cell. Jennifer was among them. Marion was afraid of this bulky woman, partly because she almost never walked alone, and many colonists had told of her cruelty. Jennifer looked at Marion with a contemptuous smile, who pretended not to notice the women who had entered the room. But how could she not notice them? "What are you doing in business, new girl?" Marion's plowwoman asked impudently. Realizing from Jennifer's tone that she did not come in peace, Marion decided not to answer anything. "I made up a nickname for her, Beads," shouted one of Jennifer's 6. All but the main one appreciated her friend's joke and laughed too. It was an unpleasant sight. These ladies were clearly out of the local color of the colony, which in general was not so bad. "All right, I'm not supposed to be quiet around here. Last name, first name." Jennifer spoke. "Marion Morris." Marion put her work aside and looked at the woman. The newcomer's eyes were full of a confidence uncommon to newcomers, and a kind of desperate insolence, which was of course bad form for someone like her. "Are you so bold?" Jennifer asked in surprise. Marion again made no reply, thinking the colonist's behavior a provocation. Her behavior offended the unspoken leader of the colony. "Well, I hear you've been weaving your stuff around here, that you've started selling it, but that's not the way it works. So 80% of your shit is coming to me. Look, it'll be under control." Marion remained stubbornly silent, She picked up her weave and continued working as if they had all left the cell. "Have you learnt everything?" No, Marion answered. "But then, now the girls will crush you a little." And for a few moments Jennifer waited. She hoped that Marion, under the pressure of the threat, would agree to her unprofitable business plan. But alas, she gave her friends a gesture, and they began to approach Marion. A fight broke out. Jennifer, as former prisoners, calculated everything. Almost no one was in the building of the colony. All went to community service. The administration was usually eating lunch at this time, and there were no guards here to monitor the prisoners. Marion didn't scream for help. She wasn't the tiniest girl, but she had never been in a fight before. She reckoned that this was her first time as well, for against Michael she was rather just defending herself. Of course she couldn't do it against 3 men, but she remembered the feeling of overwhelming rage she had felt when the man responsible for her mangled fate had touched her underwear. Jennifer's girls had had it. For one ended with a broken nose, for another with a black eye and a nail-scarred cheek. Still, Marion was beaten. She lay on the floor, holding her stomach. It only hurt, but surprisingly she did not feel fear, resentment, or despair that day or later. Marion lay on the floor for some time, beaten by the felons, though she was able to get up. Then she crawled quietly from the floor to her bunk and put her hands on her head. She thought about her future fate in this place. Jennifer, strangely enough, had stopped pestering the needlewoman who had appeared in the colony and had told her own not to hurt her either. "Morris, don't touch her. She's a hard woman of ours. I heard that she wanted to kill the old man who was bothering her," she told the girls. The colony's chief gangster even developed a certain sympathy for this young prisoner with a beautiful and rare name. Marion worked exclusively for herself, giving her trinkets to the girls and women with whom she most often socialized, or even selling them. One day, one of the prison authorities took an interest in her work, and that's how Marion got her first big money in prison. The work was painstaking, but the necklace of pink flowers came out simply amazing, and all in joy the customer paid her $2,000 for her hard work. Soon Marion decided to follow the example of some other women from the colony who had been in captivity for a long time and were beginning to go mad from the monotony of their lives. Some of them also began to weave beads, and some of them sewed clothes from patterns, and there were also those who simply embroidered cross-stitch, so to speak, for the soul. "And you have brought creativity into our society. Look, everyone is doing something. Lillian sits all day long and embroiders her flowers." "Yes, I can see it's fun," Marion smiled. Linda was the nicest person she had ever met. She was not only interesting to talk to, but also to share her feelings. This prisoner had a feeling of caring for Marion and her fate. She was the first to hear the story of the lustful old man from whom she had to defend herself. At first, Marion's story shocked her, and she could not calm down for a long time, asking her friend about the case, whether it was possible to appeal against the court decision, and whether there were people ready to fight for her. Then, having learnt that the girl had a bigger problem in her free life than her criminal record, namely the complete indifference of all her relatives and acquaintances, including her mother, Linda calmed down and stopped asking her uncomfortable questions and just sympathized with her. A year passed. No one had visited Marion once during that time. At first, listening to stories of women about how their visits with their mother, with their son, with their husband had gone, she became sad and even at times wanted to cry. Then she got used to this pain and dissolved in her daily activities. So in beating, community service, socializing with good girls from the colony, and thinking about life after prison, 2 more years passed unnoticed. Marion turned 27 years old. She was young, beautiful, and forced to sit in jail only because she had prevented a lusty old man from being abused. A few days after her birthday, which she celebrated in a tight circle of good friends, Linda among them, she was summoned to the office of the colony director. Marion was terrified and told Linda about the event. "Yes, wait. Why are you nervous?" Linda hurried to calm her friend. "I don't know. What if I did something wrong? Maybe it's because of the sale of their products." "Well, you told me that Cheryl Jones ordered something from you." "Yeah, that's why it's weird. I've been trying to remember for 3 years, and I can't figure out where I went wrong." "Look, what makes you think it's something bad? What's good?" Marion grinned nervously. The girl, even though she liked the life in captivity lately, she was counting the days until she left the colony. She had only 2 years left, and again she could live as a human being in freedom. However, thinking about it a little deeper, she began to get a little upset. I'll get out, but what then? Where to go? I won't go to my mom. I won't go to Stephen, but he won't expect me. Marion knew that she would have to look for a job and a place to live. And these thoughts burdened her, and yet Marion looked forward to freedom. Like most of the women in the colony who'd come here, some for robbery, some for theft, and some like her by coincidence by life's injustices. She walked slowly to her boss's office, fearing not only bad news from him, but illegal actions. Now, after the incident with Michael, she was afraid of strange men, and willy-nilly in ambiguous situations the girl was frightened. She became uncomfortable and frightened. Marion Morris, why are you standing there? I'm waiting for you. The headmaster, a man in his 50s with a full head of gray, looked out of the office. Hello, Marion replied briefly. William Butler, that was the name of the director of the colony, politely asked the prisoner to sit down. As she entered the office, she immediately noticed the woman sitting at the large desk to the left of the director's desk. Now she was no longer so afraid of William Butler. The woman was Amanda Hill, a social worker who had worked with the female prisoners here for a long time, and she had a kind face. The colonists loved Amanda. Yes, she could not solve all the burning questions of her wards, but she always sincerely tried to help people in their trouble. And just a personal conversation with her was sometimes a balm to the soul of these women. Amanda had no children, and she seemed to give all her motherly love to them. Marion Morris, how are you enjoying your stay in our institution, so to speak? William Butler chuckled slightly at his own words, shifting his gaze from Marion to the teacher. It's fine, I like it. Marion was startled, and it was noticeable. Marion Morris, can I ask why you're so tense right now? Amanda addressed the prisoner. I'm worried, Marion replied. Why should you be worried? Smiled William Butler, who, according to Marion's findings, had been a lively and cheerful man that day. There was silence. William Butler was staring at some papers. Perhaps it was a file on the prisoner Morris. Amanda Hill was careful not to let Marion notice her gaze. All right, ladies, well, Marion Morris, your lawyer, Mr. Christopher, has filed a motion with the court for your parole. How? Marion was surprised. Didn't you know anything? No. Marion was confused. Stephen hadn't reported in for 3 years. Was it Mr. Christopher's own initiative? She could not believe that she might be able to get out of the colony early. The prisoner's face changed visibly. She was radiant with joy. But she tried not to show it and listened attentively to William Butler. So you talk to Amanda and she'll tell you everything. There'll be a medical examination soon, mind you, and then the trial. In general, I've written you the most positive characteristic, because we here with comrades know about your hobbies, that you sew there, or beadwork, you're about to do it, and that you have a positive influence on the inmates of the colony. In general, the main thing is not to worry and believe in the best. So the court will decide. Marion asked anxiously. Yes, the court will decide everything, but we are for you. Marion thanked William Butler for the good news, and together with Amanda they went out to talk. As they wandered around the large colony grounds, they chatted about the parole process. Marion asked the educator with great interest about how it would go and what she herself had to do to be granted parole. At night before she went to bed, she was full of bright new impressions and thought of Mr. Christopher. Why did he help her? Marion was quite sure that the man had already forgotten her in that unpleasant case. It had been a long time since she had thought of him, but as it turned out, he not only remembered, but was willing to help her. The medical board found no reason to deny Morris parole. A little later, a hearing was held in the local court, where the only familiar face in the room this time was Mr. Christopher. The hearing was quick and successful. The result was the granting of the application for conditional early release of the convict under the article robbery, which meant that in 10 days, young, beautiful, and still not broken, believing in the best, Marion Morris was waiting for her long-awaited freedom. She already knew about it from the words of ex-criminals who had once been released on parole. It was the beginning of March. Although the whole earth was still covered with snow, and in general in nature there were almost no signs of spring, Marion felt it with all her body and with all her soul. She wanted to shout, freedom. But the girl's quiet disposition prevented her from doing so. She stood for some time near the high fence with barbed wire, smoking and greedily gulping the air, which this day seemed much sweeter than before. Well, Marion went to her hometown, and this time she had money with her, and there she rented a place to live. In this, she was helped by one of her acquaintances, with whom they had established good contacts while Marion was still in the colony. They began to communicate even more often than before. No one helped Marion with work. She soon found a job as a saleswoman at a cash register. The problems of the former prisoner began almost immediately after the beginning of life on the outside. It was not bad, and Marion liked it very much. A fresh start, perhaps, so she imagined her future fate when she was behind bars. But a couple of weeks later, a manager approached her at work when she was putting the goods on the shelves. "Marion, can I have a word with you?" "Yes, say it right here." "What are you talking about?" Marion asked, engrossed in her work. "Marion, it won't work here. It's important." They both went outside. The weather was fine, it was April, and it was even hot at times. "Marion, you see, today I was told from above. They say that you do not meet the qualification requirements here." The manager was very embarrassed. It was hard for her to inform this hard-working girl, who from the very first days of her work in this small grocery shop began to show enthusiasm and professionalism, that she was fired. "I see I don't fit in." Marion grinned. "Marion, what can I do?" "I was told to tell you." "Yeah, it's all about the criminal record. I know it's not your fault." Even though Marion was depressed that day, she knew there was no point in trying so hard to please the manager. She finished the day perfectly, without any complaints. "I'm sorry to see you go," her boss told her as she walked her out the next day. Marion just smiled sadly and walked to the bus stop with a cigarette. She smoked more and more often and worried about her future fate. It was an unpleasant day for Marion. She realized that she had no money to pay her rent and no success in finding a new job. She didn't want to be a beggar to her mother, but she decided to visit her family, at least to see her brother Jack and sister Cassandra. She stood for a long time in front of the windows of her home, hesitating to enter. It was her pride. In 3 years, her mother had never once bothered to find out about her. How could it be? Suddenly, her mind was full of different thoughts. What if something had happened to her? What if Marion, horrified at her own reasoning, went with a quick step into the flat? It was late in the evening. Everyone must be at home, and she rang the doorbell. It was Marion. She answered briefly to the sound of the inner door opening. A male, unfamiliar voice was heard in the distance. Another minute of fussing outside the door, and she was opened. "Marion, what are you doing here so early?" It was not a joke. It was a real misunderstanding on her mother's part, and Marion did not know whether to laugh or cry. In simple words, she was not welcome here. She walked to the living room. Her sister Cassandra was sitting there watching cartoons. Is it really her, Marion thought. The girl was all grown up, had grown-up features. Marion. Cassandra broke away from the TV series and ran up to her older sister. Marion couldn't contain her emotions. She took the girl in her arms, even though she was already overweight, and spun her around a little in front of her. "Cassandra, have you grown so big? You're 13, aren't you?" "Wow. I'm 13. And you're 20? Marion stared at her sister. Then her face turned from surprise to full of joyful emotion, and she laughed. "Cassandra, are you doing well in maths?" "How much?" Marion wondered. "I won't tell you." An unfamiliar man entered the room. He reluctantly said hello to his guest. Matthew. Matthew was tall and broad-shouldered and looked to be about 50 years old. Marion. "Nice to meet you. I'm your mother's husband." "I see," Marion replied quietly. Also, a lot had changed here, but not her mother's attitude towards her. "Mum, where's Jack?" Marion asked her mother at the table. They had all sat down to supper. "Jack lives alone now, not far from here. Would you like the address?" "Yes, of course." "Are you going to sleep over?" "No," said Marion modestly. "Come on. Where would you go at night? Do you have a place to stay or not?" Kimberly tried to be a bit of a caring mother, but she was not very good at it, and it didn't last long. The housemates persuaded Marion to stay the night and prepared a cot with clean linen. Before going to bed, Kimberly visited her daughter and they chatted about the detention. Marion talked about the future and the good lawyer, Mr. Christopher. And then her mother, for the umpteenth time in this life, upset her. "Marion," said gently and quietly to Kimberly, "I beg you very much, don't pretend to live here. Matthew and I are living so well. Jack has moved out. I'm finally happy. You understand me as a woman." "Mum," said Marion, "I'm not claiming anything." And that was the end of the conversation. They said goodnight to each other, and then Marion packed her things and left. Before leaving, her mother wanted to slip some note into her pocket. It was only 500, but Marion grinned sweetly, handed the money back and said, "Leave it. It's more important to you." She looked at Cassandra, who was as always staring at the television, even though the day was just beginning and she didn't even notice that Marion was leaving. The touching feeling she had for her was still there. She was a little sister, but Marion realized that everyone here would always be a stranger to her, and 13-year-old Cassandra was becoming more and more like her mother, losing her naive and childlike image. "Cassandra, at least go say goodbye to Marion." The girl reluctantly started and walked towards the corridor, all looking back at the TV screen. "Well, Cassandra, goodbye." Marion walked wherever she was going. She was only paying a month in advance, which meant that in a week or so she would have to move out due to not being able to pay for the room. She just wanted to wander around her hometown. Tears came to her at one point as she thought of her mother's words to her the night before. Marion hadn't been lying when she said she didn't need a place to live. She herself did not want to live in a flat with a strange man, and a man who would never be her family, who was only nominally so. Mother, who is this? Is it only worth giving birth to be called by that great sacred word? The last bright idea of family was disappearing in the girl's soul. She was at liberty, but she had neither work nor lodging, and there was absolutely nowhere to go. Stephen, the last time they had seen each other was a long time ago. It was early February, a whole 3 years ago. Back then, their relationship had come to a head and ended without announcement because Marion had gone to juvie. He was relatively young, good-looking, and successful. "I don't stand a chance," thought Marion as she sat in her room, listening to the occasional scandalous yelling coming from the next room. It was late in the evening. Without deciding anything, she went to bed. In the morning, having filtered all her thoughts and considerations overnight, Marion decided to go to Stephen's. She wasn't counting on anything, just financial help. He had helped her with her lawyer after all, and you could say, albeit indirectly, he had been involved in her parole. Perhaps he would give her some money for the first time, and that was fine with the ex-convict, who was practically at the bottom of her life. She wrote him a short message. "It's Varia. I'm free. You don't be afraid of me. I'm still the same. Tomorrow I'll be outside the shop at the Forest Cafe at 8. Marion was waiting for him at the table, drinking coffee. He was on time. He didn't have to wait a minute. From even farther away he smiled and pronounced, "Well, here we meet at last." Marion didn't hear anything, but smiled too and waved at him. "Yes, I see you, hello." The man hugged his acquaintance warmly and sat down opposite. "How are you?" asked Marion. "Yes, better than anyone else. I went even higher." "Wow, and what are you now?" "Yeah, I'm a regional manager. We don't just have New York locations anymore. We have Chicago, Florida, and Washington, D.C. now. So they're all over the place. Luckily, I was here yesterday and I'm here today. I'll be somewhere else tomorrow." "Wow." Marion was surprised. "You're doing great." "Just a little." Stephen smiled satisfactorily, full of pride. "I congratulate you on this event." "Thanks, but what about you?" "Got a place to live? Got a job?" "Well, it's hard right now. I couldn't even get a job at a grocery store." "I don't know, I'll keep looking." "And housing?" "I've been living in a flat for the last week." She sighed heavily and sadly. "What's wrong, Marion?" Stephen asked gently. "I don't want to be a beggar, but I'm in a bad situation." "Come on, Marion, we always help our own. I'll put 1,100 on your card for the first time. If you have any problems, just ask." Marion was glad that at least someone on this earth was not indifferent to her difficult situation. She had become accustomed to hardship, not wanting to live at the expense of others, and the money Stephen had given her she saw simply as salvation. No longer did she want to use it. Sitting in a cafe, she saw the ring on his finger and realized he was married. Stephen probably had children by now as well. He was a little different from his old self. He didn't have that lightness, and he spoke to her in a polite, decent way, leaving no hint at the end of the evening of any further development of the relationship. He was also a stranger to her, and yet she was grateful to him for another rescue. Standing on the balcony of her new accommodation, which she had paid for 2 months in advance, now feeling relatively stable, Marian smoked and enjoyed the cool late April day. She was determined. I'll look for a job and I'll find one, but people. Who do I need? Self has me. She raised her head high, closed her eyes, and through the small slit of her thin lips, slowly the thick cigarette smoke seeped out. The summer came. Marian found a job. She was hired at a beauty parlor, cleaning the premises. She didn't just scrub the floors. The girl watched the work of masters who painted the visitors' nails, cut hair, corrected eyebrows, and applied eyelashes. In the future, Marian wanted to learn one of these professions. But to do this, it was necessary to earn money for the courses. When she had the first money, she immediately went to a needlework shop and bought a lot of beads. In the evenings, tired from scrubbing the parlor floors, Marian strung the little balls on thread, remembering her days in the colony. Strange thoughts crossed her mind. She missed those days, for in that life there were people like herself with whom she could have a heart-to-heart talk, and they wouldn't look at you as an outsider, no matter what you told them about your plight. One fine day, and it was fine, because it was a Saturday, Marian received a call from a stranger. Here we go, another divorce. Who else could it be, she thought sadly. Still, Marian answered the call. Hello, I'm listening. There was silence. Marian was about to press the red button, but then she heard a man's voice. Is this Marian? Yes, Marian, who is this? Marian, don't hang up right away. It's the man on the other end of the line was breathing heavily. He seemed to be having a hard time speaking. Tell me, who are you? Marian asked in bewilderment. I'm your dad. I have a lot to say, but don't hang up. I'm not hanging up. Calm down. Which dad is it, Marcus? No, this is your real daddy. My name is Sebastian. I was in contact with your mom, Kimberly, about 30 years ago. I'm asking you not to reject me right away. You're not living well. You need alimony. You'd better be honest with me, Marian replied resentfully, thinking that this man wanted only profit from her. We are like that, replied the man cheerfully. Well, I'm for honesty. No one needs me in this life, Papa, and I have no money, and I have no home. I have nothing and nobody. Yes, I know, but I have everything, but I have no one to share it with. You're the only one I've got. Well, will you come visit me in Florida? Where? Marian asked me. I live in Florida. I have my own business here. I know your mom a little bit. So I told her, like you, that I have nothing. I'm starving. I need help. She told me about you too. She said let her provide for you, but I knew you were my daughter. Anyway, it's not a phone conversation. I'll send you my address. Come and talk to me. Marian hung up the phone. She realized that everything in her life very soon and very abruptly changed. Not resenting fate, not expecting anything good from it, and yet not being angry at the world. Through suffering, pain, betrayals, and hardships, she finally waited for her bright streak.